Welcome back, students of the cosmos. This is Brendon, aka Skull Babylon, aka Wolf Shield, welcoming you to another live broadcast here through ParadigmShiftCentral.com, a real-world interactive game to be able to help assist with the shift in consciousness. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. For this broadcast, we are doing another Paradigm Shift Destiny School with the specific topic being that of spirits, Sasquatch, and the paranormal. So, of course, work with the theme of, you know, all that spooky goodness, and yeah, just like the whole idea of you know, what are spirits, what are the paranormal, and really giving an opportunity for our good friend Sasquatch to take center stage during this broadcast. And before we get into things, I'm just gonna take note to be able to obviously bring attention to the fact that we do have some fellow shifters here within us here in the circle, and I'm just gonna quickly unmute their microphones. And guys, as I do this, please feel free to just make some noise, make some wolf howls, and say hello and send some love to all the people tuned into this. So make some noise, guys. Say hello to all the shifters out there. Woo, woo, woo. We love you guys.
What up?
Oh, oh.
Hey, what's going on?
Yo, man. Awesome. All right, so right now we currently got myself, Brendon, and we got Yuga, and we got our new friend Nicholas, and we also have Amanda as well. And so again, I'll just do a very, very quick introduction to make sure that you guys can hear me okay, make sure that the audio is sounding perfect. I know last time there was a bit of a technical glitch, but it should be fine using the right USB port this time. So again, for those of you who, and please share this broadcast, you guys can help promote as we're doing this. So Paradigm Shift Central, as I said, is a real world interactive game to be able to help assist with the shift in consciousness. Part of how we do that is we are creating a community, a global team of shifters, people who are intentionally helping assist with the shift. And part of how we do this is we create conscious media. We document the shift through ongoing regular community broadcasts that we do through team roundtables every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is a variation of what you're watching now. And also global meditations that we do on Sundays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can tune in for all of those at youtube.com/skullbabylon or go to live.paradigmshiftcentral.com and check out more of the website, including lots of quest journals and conscious articles and conscious community videos that we have online for your inspirational shifty goodness. So we got a lot of awesome stuff happening here within the community. I'll just mention real quick, the team Discord chat is really growing. There's a lot of life there. Please be sure to check that out either during the broadcast, after the broadcast. That is a primary place for us to be able to communicate as we keep going. So even before this broadcast, that's where we are doing a little bit of research as a team leading into it. That's in the information on YouTube, but it is also at tinyurl.com/Paradigm Shift chat. And other thing I'll just mention real quick, of course, is the Paradigm Shift team Patreon. A huge shout out to those of you who have checked that out and who are currently supporting. Huge shout out and thank you to everyone for being a part of this, because simply your attention is a huge way to be able to support. But of course, the Patreon is a way for us to be able to continue to provide what we do for the community by you guys contributing monthly micro donations. The asking donation is just $3 to $10, and you get your Shifter Booster Kit, which includes the shift buttons and of course your free hog signs and your light guardian crystals as well. And you can check out patreon.com/Brendon Culliton for that, and we'll refresh this about halfway through the show, and you guys can keep an eye on that, and we'll aim to work towards our next team milestone of 175 active Patreon donators. So thank you again, everyone. So getting right into this topic, so like I said, we're doing this around the time of Halloween, and obviously a lot of people talk about the idea of like the veil being thin, and you know, there's a lot of cultures that really acknowledge this time as like a really great opportunity to be able to connect with spirits. There's a whole bunch of seasonal transitionings, and so obviously within the bigger picture of what it is that is happening on a collective scale, it's a really great opportunity for us to be able to come together as a community, to sit around this sacred circle, to be around, you know, you can almost imagine us like sitting around a fireplace right now, kind of like sharing spooky stories and everything like that. But the context of why we were doing this, which is really important, you know, I'm a big fan of context. The context of why we were doing this is that within the Paradigm Shift Central project, you know, the bigger thing that we've always encouraged people to do is to be able to create space for us to be able to practice having the discussions that we don't always get a chance to be able to talk about. And so even when we started the Paradigm Shift Central project way back in my college back in the day, you know, it was just a place for us to be able to practice talking about things such as our good friend Sasquatch, such as like the paranormal, such as lucid dreaming, UFOs, and again, all of those things that they never really taught us about. And my personal interest in being able to talk about these topics is because for me, it's less to do with kind of getting sucked into the fascination of them, and more to do with kind of being able to see it from the bigger picture of connecting the dots, of being like, okay, how is, the story of Sasquatch connected to spirits, connected to the paranormal, and connected to the bigger shift in consciousness? Neither one of them are just like isolated in their own way. And so, I mean, truth be told, when we were kind of going into this episode, there was at one point I was originally just going to make this a pure Sasquatch show, or at least I wanted to do a pure Sasquatch show at some point. But of course, we're putting in a couple topics here at once. So what we're going to do, we're going to start focusing on the topic of Sasquatch. We're going to start with that, and then from there we're going to kind of branch things out, and we're going to get into the broader topics of spirits and the paranormal. We're going to keep the show under 3 hours. I'm going to put like a hard limit on that, and we'll use that as a way to be able to keep things concise. So again, the intention behind us doing this is really to be able to, you as the audience and us here, everyone here in the community, through these conversations, to be able to have those ideas where we can just sort of begin to see the bigger picture, when we can begin to connect the dots, when we can begin to understand, with a really open heart, the fact that there's a lot to this world that is worth our investigation, and there's a lot to this world that is kind of like, outside of the realms of the norm, is very mysterious. And so moving into the topic of Sasquatch, this has always been a fascinating topic for me. And the reason why I feel like it is so fascinating is because it's one of those things where, like, if Sasquatch is real, what else does that mean? What else is there out there? What else is there to this reality that is possibly like, just like slightly beyond the veil, that is hidden in plain sight? And so just like the basic overview of Sasquatch, and as I'm doing this, this is me kind of presenting to the class, and then from there we'll pass the talking stick around, and you guys can take turns kind of presenting your thoughts on Sasquatch, and then we'll just kind of begin to piece ideas together. And for the people in the live chat, you guys can add your information into the discussion. And also, while we're doing this broadcast, if you guys can even post like factual information into the live chat, so like literally keep a browser open right now, you guys are a part of the circle, start running some searches on Sasquatch, start finding some reports, start getting some information. One of the things I was saying, like there's literally a different account of a Sasquatch type person in almost every place in the world, every single continent, literally in the United States, like every single state has like their own variation of a Sasquatch like story. I'd love to be able to get like a list, because I was listening to a documentary, which I'll mention a little bit later, and they were going over it. But if anybody here wants to do some Google searching while we're doing this broadcast, please feel free, and it's greatly appreciated in that sense. And so just a technical side note, I was going to mention this later. If you guys are watching this video and you notice that like the frame rate is kind of lower on the videos on YouTube and everything like that, I am aware of that. I apologize for that. That will be upgraded in the future once we eventually get like a better computer rig. So thank you for your patience and the fact that like I know the audio is like always out of sync with this, but that's just for the time being. But anyways, so what's that link so I can log on there? Bonnie, okay, I'll just, before I even get into this, for those of you looking to join the Hangout, I'm just going to post a link right into the YouTube chat. So we're just doing this because, we got like a good community here, and people are welcome to join on the fly. So Bonnie, who I can see posting in the YouTube chat, I just posted the link to join the Hangout. Just click that right there. You can jump right in. And for anybody else, please feel free to jump in as we keep going. So, okay, Sasquatch. Okay, so I was watching a documentary earlier today, and it was called Into the Forest, and is like called Bigfoot Into the Forest. And I actually invited the author of the documentary to be able to tune into the broadcast, and they could be listening at this point, and if they are, absolutely, invitation for them is there to join as well. And they had some really amazing factual information within this documentary, and I'll make sure to post the links for it into the YouTube info as well. But again, just look up Bigfoot Into the Forest and you'll find this. And so rather than being like kind of like a spectacle, like just like kind of over the top documentary about Bigfoot, it was really just like historically just going over all of the records that have been documented of these different cases of people having encounters with Bigfoot type entities. And the thing that's so fascinating is that you begin to realize that this is nothing new. In fact, as long as there have been people, there have been documented encounters of them interacting with like the wild men or the bushmen, or again, like the Bigfoots. There's so many different names for them. And so it really starts getting you into this like bigger idea of like, like who are the Sasquatch? What are the Sasquatch? What are they here? What are their personalities like? How have they been kept secret so long? And what are they here to teach us within this bigger shift in consciousness? So there's quite a few theories that we'll kind of get into as we go. One of the main things that I really love to just kind of like even hit upon right off the top is the idea of like, thinking of Sasquatch as actually being far more sentient than oftentimes we sort of think of it as, and really being able to understand that there's the idea that this is a conscious entity, and not just like a dumb ape or something like that. Like they have families, they have lives, they have personalities, they have tools, they have, they can make things and things like that. And so even right off the bat, as we get into this, at this point, there's still room for the debate as to like whether or not Sasquatch is real and everything like that. But especially watching this documentary and stuff, I am really just kind of like bypassing the whole idea of whether or not Sasquatch exists, and really just getting right to the fact that yes, like there is absolutely 100%, there is like Sasquatches all over the world. And so like, let's start investigating. Let's start looking into this a little bit deeper. And so even, just through this broadcast, I really hope to be able to open more people up to this space of kind of shifting from that, like, oh, like, do I believe in Sasquatch, to really kind of being like, okay, like, yeah, like Sasquatch is a part of this reality. And so of course, like throughout history, there's accounts of different cultures having different interactions with Sasquatch, and most notably being like the Aboriginal native cultures, who again, like they talk about like having relationships. They talk about being able to learn from them. They talk about like seeing them as like brothers, and so like even within like the bigger picture of still seeing them as an extension of like one source consciousness and everything like that. So Ryan, just join the link through the YouTube chat. You'll be able to join right there. So again, like I'm gonna pass the talking stick here. So for me, there's a lot of things that we can get into, and I'll just mention them real quick. I'm really fascinated on just kind of like going over some of the actual accounts that people have had with Sasquatch. There's some very in particular that I want to be able to talk about a little bit later, including breeding that has taken place between Sasquatch and humans, and what the results of that have been, and how it has actually been documented, which is some really crazy stuff. And the idea that Sasquatch may actually be like a quasi-dimensional entity, meaning that they can actually like phase shift out of our normal dimension, and this is part of the reason why like we haven't been able to see them. Another thing I want to be able to do is even like talk about like the video evidence that we have gotten of Sasquatch over the years, in notably like the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and kind of like a little bit of the history behind that as well. I want to get into the idea of like the Sasquatch actually being like telepathic, which is like a really fascinating idea. I want to get into the idea of, thinking about how in many cases there are these common links between Sasquatch and UFOs. And there was one story that was really trippy, and I had never really heard this until I watched the documentary Into the Forest, and it was just briefly mentioned. But it was basically this account where it was two girls, and they saw a Sasquatch, and they said that the Sasquatch was like holding a glowing ball of light. And I have never heard this before. So when I heard this, I was like, oh, okay, like this is interesting, right? Because it suddenly kind of shifts this, where it's just like, okay, Sasquatch, UFOs, they're two different things. They're two different phenomenons or something like that. But then you start getting into this idea of like, what if, and I've heard this idea before, like what if in some cases, some Sasquatch, like there's many different types of Sasquatch, we're just using that name in a broad sense, some Sasquatch may actually be almost like satellite reconnaissance for other parts of the universe, for like aliens in a sense, if we are kind of using that term in a general idea. And I've heard this before that, like in a sense, this is kind of what I feel. I feel that in a sense, Sasquatch, like as an extension of consciousness, has almost always been alongside with us throughout history, kind of like keeping an eye on this, almost like a, again, kind of like like through Sasquatch the universe can observe us in a sense, or maybe something's observing us through the Sasquatch is kind of another idea. But basically like this, yeah, like this idea that I mean, again, I'm just kind of, I got a few ideas going in my head right now. Again, this is all just practice. But yeah, so again, like just the idea that, you know, Sasquatch, there have been so many documented cases of it long before kind of like the phenomenon of the, you know, modern day media came about and suddenly squashed the Squatch. That's a weird way of saying it. But, you know, because like up until like probably about like the 1960s or about like the 1950s, up until like about that time, sorry, I'm just making sure the audio is good on that. So up until about that time, it was not actually incredibly like uncommon for people to have have these Sasquatch encounters, because like back in the 1850s and stuff like that, there are hundreds of different reports in newspapers of people who have had these Sasquatch encounters. And again, and at that point, there was no kind of like, it wasn't a tabloid thing or anything like that. You know, it would be people out hunting or something, and they would say like, holy crap, you know, like I had this encounter with this wild 7-foot tall thing, and I couldn't tell if it was an animal or a human. And then again, they would go back to their town and they would tell people about it, and then they would like end up getting like written about and documented about. And then again, like this just kind of started to become like something that was just on the fringe of what we knew, but it wasn't entirely dismissed. And then it wasn't until like, again, like kind of like 1960s, 1970s, a little bit later on, that eventually, you know, people are just like, oh, it's fake. It's fake. It's all fake. It's fake news, man. Sasquatch is fake news. Jeez. But I think it's fascinating to look at the fact that there is literally, especially in the United States, almost every single state has like their own version of Sasquatch. They have like their own different names for it. And even what's fascinating is that where I am in Canada, there are lots of different reports of the Sasquatch. And even like, yeah, like I was reading, there's like a place called Pembroke, which is like in Ottawa, not too far away from where I am. And again, so it was just really interesting to hear like these Sasquatch reports in Canada. There's another documentary that I'll mention a little bit later on, and I actually want to play some audio of it, and it's called Speaking of Sasquatch, and it's literally like, it's called Speaking of Sasquatch, Sasquatch, Ontario. So again, Ontario is a province in Canada, which is where I live. And what's fascinating is that this guy really goes out of his way to do interviews with like a lot of like the native Aboriginals and like their relationships to Sasquatch. And also they have an interview, and I might play some audio with this a little bit later on, with a channeler who is talking about, you know, like what are the Sasquatch here to teach us. And I'll just mention this right off the top, and then I'm going to pass the talking stick around, and we'll just get you guys sharing some thoughts on this and start, you know, taking notes and piecing this puzzle together. What I feel, and this is kind of the context that I want to create for this discussion, rather than just looking at Sasquatch as just like a fascination and just like something that will get sucked into the abyss of, in terms of just like, oh wow, this is a mystery and, you know, it's fascinating. I feel that the purpose of that mystery is that Sasquatch kind of relates back to this idea that in order to be able to understand the Sasquatch, we too have to be at a certain vibrational frequency in order to be able to see ourselves in them. Meaning that Sasquatch is actually here as a teacher to be able to help open our hearts. And this is a very, very like powerful message, you know, when you just like think about that we can have a relationship to the Sasquatch. But if we're scared of them, if we're fearful, then we project that fear onto them. And then there will always be that wall of fear between us and seeing ourselves through the Sasquatch. A lot of like, again, like the channeling in the Aboriginals, they say that, you know, like the Sasquatch, like they are like loving and very like, you know, very peaceful creatures. And so it's very fascinating just to think about the idea that Sasquatch are here from that higher level of consciousness to sort of like get our curiosity piqued, but then to lead us towards the path of further opening our heart and beginning to see what is already there, what has actually been around us all the time. And in the same way with like psychedelics and any other stuff, you know, it's kind of one of those things that if we could actually see what is already around us all the time, we wouldn't be able to handle it. It would be too much information. And so in that sense, it makes sense that Sasquatch is there, but we're just not always able to see it. And those who are ready to see it will see it. So, like I said, there's a few other accounts that I want to get into a little bit later, including an account from Les Stroud, the Survivor Man. A lot of people would know him, and again, he's a Canadian and stuff like that. And I was listening to like a story that he told on Joe Rogan podcast, and I'll tell that a little bit later. But there's so much information out there, and I really encourage you guys to go and look. There is a lot more footage of Sasquatch stuff than you might even realize. And so again, there's keep doing your research, keep doing all the information's out there, and go check out the documentaries as well. So again, Bigfoot Into the Forest and Speaking of Sasquatch would be the top two that I would recommend at this point. And quick plug, the Into the Forest, the sequel for that is actually coming out in a couple weeks. Like when I emailed the director, like they said that you're like, oh, I'm just finishing up the sequel, so I'm looking forward to that. So and if they're able to join the show, that would be super fascinating. So again, thank you everyone for tuning into this. Let's continue to explore this mystery a little bit further. And at this point, we'll Bonnie is asking what were the books called. Bonnie, those were documentaries. Yeah, those are documentaries on YouTube. So again, Speaking of Sasquatch and Into the Forest, I'll post a link for them into the YouTube as well. They're also in the Paradigm Shift video playlist. So if you go to the main website, just look under the playlist, you'll see them there. All right, so I'm looking to someone to volunteer to go first and to be able to share a little bit about what they think about Sasquatch. So we got Yuga to volunteer first. Okay, so then from there, so again, like keeping it focused on Sasquatch, we'll get into like the spirits and paranormal stuff a little bit later in the show, but I really want to be able to give Sasquatch the main stage for this. So shout out to the Sasquatch. Maybe there's like a Sasquatch out there who's like got like an iPhone and they're tuned in right now. You don't know, man. You don't know. So cool. Okay, I'd like to hope so. All right, one of these days, man, I'm gonna get an interview with Sasquatch. You guys just wait. All right, Yuga, I'm gonna pull up your microphone and we're gonna pass the talking stick over to you. So Yuga, just do a quick microphone check real quick.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Okay, cool, man. All right, Yuga, welcome back to the roundtable. Welcome back to Destiny School. Please tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Sasquatch and anything else that you would like to bring to the broadcast. Go ahead, dude.
When I first had my awakening, I did do quite a bit of research on Sasquatch, and I may have seen the documentary you're talking about with the account with Sasquatch breeding with humans. Are you talking about the incident in Russia?
There's actually been multiple accounts of Sasquatch breeding with humans, so it's
I
probably a
can't
different one than the
remember.
Russian one. But go ahead.
I can't remember the documentary I specifically saw, but it was talking about the evolutionary advancements of mankind, how our bone density doesn't match with the fossil records, and how a village in Russia ended up capturing a Sasquatch, and then they were torturing it and raping it. It had 2 kids. The first one was killed on accident by the Sasquatch mother because it had bathed it in the river. And then the second one was ended up being separated and raised with the humans. And the guy even dug up the grave and analyzed the remains. More on the quasi-dimensional aspect, I firmly believe that. I just wish there was more evidence. But going back to my trips to Sedona, I actually did have some encounter with a Sasquatch-like being, and almost everything you said about them being friendly and loving, I mean, this, from my interpretation, he was like a very good brother to me, a good bro. And that telepathic communication, the spaceship stuff, I mean, I thought I was kind of alone on that. I had memes about telepathic Sasquatch and stuff. So really, really cool that you're bringing that up to the table. And he kind of ended up saving my ass a little bit because there was so much stuff energetically going around me. He really taught me how to take a stand, and I felt like that was really important for me at the time. Another thing about the Sasquatch is how it is a global phenomenon. And going back to I can't remember specifically what you said, the main video from California that a lot of people reference, there's been so much analytics done on that, and just biologically, it could not be a human based off of how the proportions and how the actual creature was walking. No human can imitate that specific set of movements based off of the computer analysis and the recreations. Then also going back to my experience, what was interesting about the whole spaceship thing was when I was in Sedona doing my vision quest, I had taken a stone, and was really interesting about the stone. It looked like just any other pickup, but when you tap it, it dung pretty loud, especially for a rock. And so I took that back with me, and I found like it looked like a giant footprint in rocks, like right across the street from my place. And like a few nights later, I was at my neighbor's place, like right next door to me, and some water had spilled, and there was a giant footprint, like a human-shaped footprint, right next to the door. And he was kind of getting on my case about how I stole his spaceship and stuff, and then he ended up letting me keep it as kind of a memento for experience. So I definitely resonate a lot with that.
Wait, sorry, can you just say that again? I wasn't entirely clear. You just said Sasquatch let you keep his spaceship?
Yeah, it was like a part of his space. It's really hard to explain. I really don't know how to explain it, but he was upset that I had took, I guess, quote unquote, his technology. But like I said, it looked like a regular stone, but it dung really loud like a bell. And then the boulder that I had parked next to, he said he was looking for that, but because of where he was at energetically, he couldn't detect the giant stone that I was right next to, and that entire thing had that same dinging effect.
So are you saying
And
that
that
like you've had
was
an experience where you feel that you were like within close proximity to a Sasquatch?
when I was in Sedona with the Vision Quest, I wanted to keep my windows down in the car that night, but something was like, "Don't do it. There's something staring at you. Just keep it peaked a little bit." I consciously didn't see anything. I definitely felt something near me, and the communication within myself and with whatever was there was very crystal clear. I
Interesting,
really
interesting.
can't expend too much on that other than
Yeah,
he let me call him Mr. Sir, kind of like from the movie Holes, but overall it was a very brotherly experience.
interesting.
He had
Okay.
his back for me, or he had my back.
And you didn't, but like you didn't like see anything though. It was
Other
just
than
like
the
a felt.
footprints, I didn't see anything.
And were the footprints like Bigfoot footprints or?
I posted it in Discord. You really
Yeah,
can't tell, but
it's
when
hard
you
to tell
saw it
from
in
that.
person, you could definitely make out it as a footprint. And then I saw the water footprint that it just like you spilled some water and then bam, there was a footprint.
Hmm.
That's the
Okay.
best way I could reference it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So cool. All right, man. Well, is there anything else you want to share in the moment? We'll keep passing talking stick around and we'll get into popcorn style in a
Um,
minute.
I think I'll just cut it off there and I'll pop in later
Cool.
when there's more input.
Cool.
I just
Cool.
kind of want to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. Appreciate it. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Yuga. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, we're gonna keep passing talking stick around and looking for volunteers. So if anybody either just wants to unmute their mic if they don't have video camera, or just put their hand up to volunteer. So again, we got Amanda, we got Bonnie, we got Nicholas, and we got Ryan, Yuga, and myself. So either Amanda, Bonnie, Nicholas, or Ryan, if one of you guys wants to volunteer to go next. I think Bonnie wants. Bonnie, do you want to go next? Was that a yeah. Okay, Bonnie, we'll pull up your microphone in a second. And yeah, and again, you know, like even I know Amanda might have some stuff to share a little bit later and stuff, but like I know prior to this broadcast, like Amanda was like, she was talking to her neighbors and everything in her area, and her neighbors were. This was the gist of it that I got. I guess she'll be able to tell you a little bit later, but like they were talking about how like the belief in Sasquatch is still something that's like very present for them. There, like that's the thing, guys. Like there are people in the United States right now who firmly not just like believe but know that there is like a Sasquatch in their area, and they're careful about it. Like they'll be careful about like, you know, like even, you know, like letting their pets out late at night, and there's reports of these. This is where there's like a well-known documented case of what is known as like the skunk ape in Florida, and there's like a photo of it, and I might be able to pull up the photo if we can get enough like resource power to get it up on screen. I'll try and do that, and I'll kind of let you guys like judge for yourself and everything like that. But yeah, no, again, I just kind of hitting upon the idea that, you know, the Sasquatch thing is not as far away as you think. Like literally, if you were to go to any place in the United States and find the right person to talk to, I bet you could find someone to tell you about like their local Sasquatch story. So it's interesting, man. So all right, let me just double check here. So Bonnie, I'm gonna pull up your microphone. Bonnie, would you like to go next? Is that sure? Okay, cool. All right, Bonnie, welcome to Destiny School. Thank you so much for joining and passing the talking stick over to you. What are your thoughts on the elusive Sasquatch?
Okay. My thoughts, questions, honestly, are like, how do they get the, you know how it's usually like a human-ish looking footprint, right? So I get this whole image, like I just Google imaged just now, like looked it up, and it always looks kind of like a creature, right? Like, so why do they think that that's what he looks like? Is it just that there, or she, or them? Is it just because there's so many accounts of that, of them looking that certain way? And then my second question, or actually the statement I wanted to say that I just found was interesting, that drew me on here. So I do a lot of clairvoyant work, readings and healings sessions. And one thing that a lot of it's like calling in people's angels and spirit guides and different spirit allies and all a range of different realms that seem to come together to help us if we're choosing to tap into this higher vibration of consciousness, right? And a lot of times, one of the things I see is like I've seen, and it doesn't always come up, but the head like pop in and it like takes up the whole room, almost the size of the head, but it doesn't always look like a Sasquatch necessarily. So kind of wondering if like maybe that's some of the realm that some of these like big figures that I see in some of the different energy work that I do could be from. And like, so why do they look so it kind of relates to my question of, you know, could it just be like people looking things, or do we make them look like a creature because it went better for the stories? Are there actually accounts of people seeing Sasquatch as like this bear-ish looking thing, or could it be like more person looking, like, or I'm curious about how people figure out like what it looks like, the look of or if it's just giant. And yeah, that's about all I have to say about that right now.
Mhm. Cool. Thank you, Bonnie.
You-
Yeah, I think and again, like that's kind of the thing that the documentary I was watching earlier, Bigfoot Into the Forest, which again highly recommend. Huge plug for that. Great job on the film. They do a great job of really just kind of showing that there throughout all these different reports of all the different Sasquatch sightings, there's variations. Like it's not literally just like one being. It's kind of like the Sasquatch we're just kind of using as a blanket term to classify this genre of species, whatever it may be. And so, I mean, like, there are some Sasquatch that look like really freaking scary. And then you get like other Sasquatches that actually look like very gentle and so there's many different variations of them. And even just I'll pass it off a bit, but I want to be able to like pull up some stuff video wise and things throughout this broadcast as best we can, so you guys can see some of the visual evidence without it crashing my computer, hopefully. So just gotta be careful about that. But yeah, let's keep passing talking stick around. But thank you, Bonnie. That's again, like just kind of thinking about like the look of the Sasquatch and the different ways in which they appear. And again, like even all across like all the continents, like in Asia and stuff like that, they have like they're like a longer red-haired version, and they're not like as tall, but it's just fascinating. So again, I'm not I wouldn't say I'm like an expert, but I'm definitely as curious as you guys are as well, so figuring this out together. Okay, let's pass the talking stick around. Who would like to go next? Just put a thumbs up if you would like to go next. Okay, cool. Nicholas. All right, Nicholas, I'm gonna pull your microphone up. And Nicholas, thank you for joining for the first time to one of our broadcasts, and happy to have you here, man. And I think you got a general feel of just kind of how this works. This is all just practice, but yeah, please practice sharing with us some of your thoughts, or just ideas about the whole Sasquatch phenomenon. Maybe how it relates to the bigger picture that we're trying to put together here. So go ahead.
Yeah,
dude.
wonderful. So first of all, I want to thank you all for sharing and honor you for your reflections on the eternal, because everyone's piece is very important, and it's amazing what it looks like you're able to put together here in this role. So thank you all for being here. So I want to take Sasquatch to source and try to connect Sasquatch to us on the deepest level possible, in that Sasquatch can be anything that you project onto it. Sasquatch is your ego's personification of the other. So what we see in the mirror is what we may see on the deepest, most fundamental level, no matter what that reflection may be. It can be, the most beautiful thing we've ever seen, and it can be what's on the screen right now. That looks pretty scary. I wouldn't want to meet that guy really late at night in a dark alleyway, or the but this hyperdimensionality and this way that the Sasquatch can be many different things to many different people. I think that's because it's our own internal psyche's reflection, you know? So if you're feeling scared in that moment, in that environment, there's something terrifying. If you're feeling open and positive and loving and, you know, friendly, the Sasquatch may appear in that state. That's what you attract to you through the law of attraction, you know? So, and then the other note I had was advanced technologies. I don't really know exactly what that means, but if the Sasquatch has advanced technologies, then maybe that's part of our search for those technologies, because we recognize that we fundamentally have that potential within us. So we're trying to, you know, reunify this, you know, the man ape, the that part of us, so that we can move forward and build higher, you know? So that's what I got. I'll pass it on now.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, man. Yeah, no, and I think that's a good way of thinking about it. The idea that like Sasquatch very much is gonna serve as a reflection for us to see ourselves. So again, you know, I think if some people naturally are just like, oh, like Sasquatch, like be like, you know, like, oh, screw that guy, like, you know, like that's a scary thing, like assuming they believe it exists, or you know, they would see it as like something they need to like claim ownership over, or to assume dominance of, and things like that. Whereas, you know, I think people who are kind of more on that conscious level, not only does the idea of Sasquatch become something that's not entirely far-fetched, but again, you begin to see it as just an extension of you, as an extension of the eternal, extension of the source, as you were saying, Nicholas. And so again, you know, I think for anybody here, really encouraging you to just kind of be able to see, you know, see the Sasquatch in you, see yourself in the Sasquatch, and just kind of like trying to understand a little bit more about them. I'm just gonna, before we pass it over here, I'm just gonna do a quick screen share real quick. We're gonna see if this is gonna work properly. I think this will work fine. I encourage you guys to do this, and hopefully this doesn't freak you out too much, but literally if you just Google search Sasquatch face, take a look here, like on camera, if you're able to see here, take a look here at like all of the different types of faces that we have of Sasquatch. And again, like, you guys have to keep in mind that like this is not an isolated incident. Like, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of reports of Sasquatch like all over the world that have been going back as long as time has been recorded. So it really gets into this idea. And again, this is where I think that, you know, like Sasquatch was almost from the level of source consciousness, we can kind of get into this idea of thinking like, okay, let's put humans on Earth, and you know, that's they're here for the evolution and everything like that. But considering this is all a bit of an experiment by consciousness itself, it would make sense to be like, okay, but let's put another part of us like nearby as like a satellite to keep an eye on them, to be able to have like a parallel experience, but to also be able to again, like be a part of their story as well. So you can see like how, like, just kind of scrolling through the image here, you have a pretty much almost like a 50-50 variety of like some Sasquatch who look like completely like menacing and like characters out of a horror movie, and then you get other Sasquatches that actually look like very like docile and friendly and incredibly human, you know, like one of them there like looks basically like an Ewok, so to speak. So and then there's one here, if my browser doesn't crash, just want to be able to go up a little bit. If I can see if I click this is gonna work. So this is just kind of like a cool picture here, because what you're seeing on screen here is, again, just kind of like this artist rendition, and this is like something that I used in a meme earlier today, of like a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, standing there next to like a small Native American like child, like a boy or girl. You can't really tell, you see the back of them. And so again, you know, it's just like, imagine yourself back in the day being as part of like Aboriginal culture and actually having a relationship with the Sasquatch. Like, imagine how interesting that would be, but at the same time, imagine if that actually wasn't incredibly like far-fetched. Like, imagine if that was actually normal. Imagine what that would feel like. Imagine just kind of, because again, at that point, nobody's told you otherwise. Nobody's told you like, oh, this shouldn't exist or this is paranormal. At that point, it's literally, it is what is. And it's just a part of that experience. And again, I think like this is when you really start to listen to like the Aboriginal cultures, that like this is like what they've been kind of trying to tell us like ignorant white folk and everything like that. We're commonly just like rooted in our root chakra of fear and everything. But the Sasquatch is really teaching us how to move to the heart, where it's this idea that, kind of similar to our nightmares, where, we see the fear in our nightmares that is there to help us dissolve it, to help us to be able to meet it with compassion. So again, yeah, it's just fascinating to think like Sasquatch is meant to look scary and menacing, but it's meant to be like a guardian, a threshold, a mirror for us to be able to see past our initial reaction to that size and that scariness, and to be able to be like, oh wow, okay, cool, like this is this is another human in here. And again, and I use the term human in a very broad sense. As many of you heard me before, the term human, I often refer to that as like hue of mana. So like the term human, it's not just us as people, it's really like anything that has the godness inside of it. So can you see the humanness inside the Squatch? So again, like there's so much evidence, and again, at this point, like we are way past the point of like, oh, is Bigfoot real? Like, no, Bigfoot is definitely there. So let's just keep like going a little bit further, again, kind of like what we can learn from it. And then as we go within the next half hour, kind of begin to like segue a little bit more into like a little bit of like the paranormal spirit side of things as well. I realize this is kind of like quite a broad topic, but yeah, I just want to be able to put it all on the table. All right, so checking back in, who wants to go next? Does Ryan want to go next? Does Amanda want to go next? Does one of you want to let the other go first? We'll let Ryan go first. Does Amanda wants to go first? Okay, I think Amanda wants to go first because I think she's just got other stuff she's got to do. So Amanda,
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we got your microphone up, Amanda. So welcome back to the circle, and yeah, happy to have you here. And please tell us what you would like to bring. And I know again you were talking to your neighbors about it and stuff, so you can report back with what you've uncovered. So. Go ahead, Amanda, whenever you're ready.
Hey, yeah, no, seriously, I just have like family stuff to get back to, and so that's
Cool.
why I'm like, let me go.
Perfect.
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, you and I were talking earlier this week, and I was like, so, my neighbors have a giant cutout of a Sasquatch like right across the street. It's so weird. Yeah. So I got a chance to talk to them the other night, and it was actually really cool because I hadn't had a chance to talk to them in that kind of fashion before. And yeah, it's a real thing around here. Like I've always known like there's bumper stickers and there's, t-shirts and stuff. And so I've always known that I live in Bigfoot country. And I'm always like, I don't even know what that means. Like, really? People believe this stuff? Like, you kind of just go, okay, people believe that, whatever. Just like, people believe all kinds of things. And so, in this whole last week, I feel like I've evolved in my thinking about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the wood ape. I don't know. Florida calls it the skunk ape. I don't know. You'll do your list of names later. So yeah. So I've just been like really delving into like what this all means to people. And honestly, my library didn't have a lot of information about it, which, is kind of annoying because we do have other paranormal things and whatnot. But like the local library has nothing on Bigfoot. Like the one thing I could find was Bigfoot Texas Ranger. And I'm like, what the heck is that? Is that like a TV show or something? I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, even our local library doesn't want to talk. You're right. I think people are afraid of it, but I don't think it is something to be afraid of. Believe. And this is just what I've kind of evolved to believe in this last week, because I haven't even thought that much about it. But when you, and this is going to get us all off on that next topic of paranormal. I know that you guys are going to go crazy after I bring this up, but we are definitely, like we were talking about it today in the Discord chat, we're definitely hybrids. We are aliens and monkey hybrid of some sort. And I believe that the Bigfoot are those giants, those creatures, those apes or whatever that were here long before the aliens came to this planet. And when the aliens came, they bred with the Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever the local, I don't even know what to call them. It almost feels like if you call them Bigfoot, it's like calling someone a Indian or what, you know what I mean? It just sounds like you're calling it like a
Yeah, it's very derogatory almost.
derogatory term. And so I'm like, God, am I gonna offend some Bigfoot back here and he's gonna come over, you know,
Right.
over the fence and get me? You know what I mean? Anyways, so yeah, just basically what I feel is there's a whole hybrid thing kind of going on. And if you look at Bigfoot, he looks just like Neanderthal. He looks like early man. I'm pretty sure there was some sort of a cross, you know, uh, contamination or whatever with the DNA. And that's where we came from, is like we have a little bit of Bigfoot in us, you know, and that's where we kind of can just, I don't know, we can just kind of accept it as it's a part of ourselves. But also what I think too is with the whole what was I going to say? The whole being scared of it thing or whatever. It's just, it is. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It's interdimensional. Like, it's not even folklore, and even folklore may be interdimensional. Who fucking knows? Sorry. But I do believe that, you know, this whole thing could be just an interdimensional, like the, like you were, I think you even said this earlier, like you actually only see them when you're open, when you're like open to things, and it's like, yeah, it's like an interdimensional thing, and they could even be from a different time. They could be from a different space. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, it opens things up for anything. And I don't discount their, um, that, that they are a possibility.
Totally. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Amanda, and please let us know if you happen to like come across any in your neighborhood. So just casually out and about.
Okay.
Leave some apples on your back porch, and they'll probably come say hi.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, there was a,
Go for it.
there was a mysterious universe. I have to bring it
Yeah,
up. There's a mysterious
plug it.
universe. I love that podcast.
So do
You
I.
guys
So do
just-
I.
It's so good. They're so funny. But there was a cute little granny story where this granny was baking
I know which one you're talking about.
Bigfoot cookies. You remember that one?
Yeah,
Oh my god. And she passed it on to her kids and was like, after she died, they had no idea while she was alive. She dies, and they're like, what is this Bigfoot cookie recipe? And so it turns out this one cookie, you know, special recipe on the porch for Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, where it was. But anyways, it was the cutest story on Mysterious Universe. And yeah, I was like, I think they even posted the recipe, and they're like, if you want to bake the cookies only Bigfoot, you can. And that's what I'm saying, is like, maybe Bigfoot will even hear my conversation with you guys. And yeah, maybe next couple weeks I'll get a visit or something. Who knows? I live in that kind of area where it wouldn't be that abnormal to see something like that. So thanks for listening.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for sharing. So yeah.
Good night.
All right, we'll see you later, Amanda. Well, tell Bigfoot we said hi.
Okay, we will.
Cool. Honestly, right? Like, I mean, I just like imagining this like super sophisticated Bigfoot in like a suit with glasses and stuff like that. You know, just be like kind of like the beast out of X-Men, like Kelsey Grammer or something like that. But yeah, I mean, who knows, right? There's so much to this that I think is there to spark our curiosity, and it's kind of like, for me, it's similar to the UFO phenomenon. It's there to get our attention. It's there to be able to like ask questions and go a little deeper. Like I said, there's a lot more I want to be able to talk about. I was trying to bring up some footage in my browser, but my browser's just it's not loading it at the minute. But I did want to be able to see if I can play some audio from the Speaking with Sasquatch documentary, and then we're gonna pass it over to Ryan. And I feel like this will actually set Ryan up a little bit, even though like I don't know what Ryan's gonna say, but I got like a feeling of what he might say. But I feel like what I'm gonna play will actually just kind of like help be a little bit of a good lead-in. So let me just double check to make sure if this is gonna work. And I'm not gonna worry about the video because it'll just like kind of like crash my browser. But this is like a woman who is in the documentary Speaking of Sasquatch, Sasquatch, Ontario. And I kind of skimmed through the documentary. I'm going to go back and watch it more in detail afterwards. But from what I understand, this is like her kind of like channeling with Bigfoot. Like she's already done the channeling and now she's kind of like telling you about what her thoughts on Bigfoot are, what Bigfoot has to share. So let me just play some of the audio here and check if it's going to work. And then if it does, we'll keep playing. So give it a second here. We'll just kind of...
Tool, I don't know if tool would be the word, but sort of like crystal.
Okay.
Like crystals.
Well, we certainly have heard of the way in which a gifted healer can utilize a
Right.
crystal to channel energy.
It has to do with what's in your heart.
Yeah.
It doesn't even, you don't have to go to a marble workshop.
Well, I can tell you, flying back from Toronto, one of the Sikh security men who was inspecting my bags, when he saw them, he just...
Filled with light, and then our consciousness is expanded.
All right, so just listen to this part. This is what I was looking for. So we're just going to let this play just for the next minute.
Your
So go ahead.
people make the dimension. Dimension only in your head. Bring light into heart, then you know no dimension. All dimension, all one. My understanding of that was that when our hearts are filled with light and then our consciousness is expanded to include all dimensions, there's no need to distinguish different dimensions. They are all one dimension in the all one. Nefertia went on to say, the marbles are for you to bring your light of the all one, to others of your people who want to feel the light. We give you our light in the marble, and you make your light in the marble, and then you can bring light to others of your people. Without your light, light cannot go to others of your people.
With respect to the marbles, my understanding from what Nefertia has given...
All right. Okay. So I'm just gonna jump in there for a second. So again, the context here is that this is like a family in Ontario, and they have a relationship with the local Sasquatch, and they give them gifts, and they give them these marbles, and this is what this woman's talking about here. So now again, this is where I'm not entirely sure. I have to go back and watch it, but yeah, like they were like the Sasquatch had gotten marbles from somewhere, or like, but they were giving them to the humans or something. So the Sasquatch were like leaving marbles for the humans. And again, and this is where this lady was kind of channeling, basically just kind of saying that, you know, the gift that the Sasquatch are trying to give to these humans is one of compassion, is one of open-heartedness, is one of reminding them of the light within themselves, so that them as humans can continue to bring that light out to other people. So imagine like how much of a paradigm shift it might be for any of us here to actually one day meet a Sasquatch, and imagine how that may actually like change our reality and change the way we kind of see the world. But then what if like the Sasquatch was actually basically like a yogi, and was like totally just kind of like giving us all this like metaphysical wisdom and everything like that, and just kind of like teaching us straight up like, okay, like as we kind of create a bridge between us, this is going to help you create a bridge between yourself and like the rest of culture, the rest, like the gap between like ourselves and our own heart, so to speak. So let me just double check. I'm just gonna play just 1 more minute of the audio here. Again, I don't know exactly what's coming at this point, but I'll just let it play and we'll just kind of see what comes out. And again,
given you is that the energy that they imbue the marbles with is potentiated by the energy that we bring to them, and in that way they become useful as objects that can facilitate, as they say, bringing light in. Could you talk a little bit more about?
Yes, it's like it is necessary for us to bring our energy, our heart energy, to the marble to join with the Sasquatch energy to then become what I would say is probably a very powerful healing tool. I don't know if tool would be the word, but sort of like crystals.
Well, we certainly have heard of the to operate the mechanism in some way, however that works. I don't know how it works, if they're physically actuating it or not. They appear to be doing so due to the markings that are left on the canvas. But
okay, so we'll just pause this here for now. I might be able to pull up some stuff a little bit later, but we're going to pass over to Ryan, and we'll just have more students within the circle to be able to share a little bit more. And yeah, again, that's from the Speaking of Sasquatch documentary. Really recommend you guys go check this out. Again, you know, like at this point, like there is like, oh, like the only thing that's missing is like that physical body of a Sasquatch that everybody wants. And of course they want that. And even, you know, within the whole concept of Sasquatch, a lot of people would be like, you know, if Sasquatch is real, how come we haven't found one of their bodies? How come we haven't found one of their bodies like out in the woods? One side to that concept is the idea that like, well, maybe the Sasquatch are actually like smart enough to bury their own dead, like they're sentient enough to bury their own dead. So just like another something to keep in mind. But again, you know, like there's thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of like unmonitored terrain out there in the world. Like literally, we as humans, if you go in an airplane, you realize how small of a space we actually populate. And so there's so much space out there. It's not hard to believe that like, yeah, there could be these, you know, these Sasquatch who are existing out there. But again, you know, the question remains, like, what is their lineage? Where did they come from? Have they been the same for like thousands of years? Have they been evolving alongside with us? Did there used to be a bunch more of them and now there are less? Were they more common back in the day? Again, and as multidimensional beings, do they only show themselves to us when they want to be seen, so to speak? And they kind of like exist within the same plane, but not always like phased into this physical dimension. So again, it's just all like, I really think once you start getting into the dimensional side of things, the Sasquatch story really starts to open up. And another thing, I'll just plant this here and we'll pass over to Ryan, is one idea as a quote unquote conspiracy as to like why the Sasquatch story has been kept under wraps is actually because the Sasquatch story, if people were to realize that it was true, there is like a direct connection between Sasquatch and like UFO technology and all sorts of other, you know, stuff. Like there's a much bigger story here, and this is where you can start getting into the idea of the fact that there's like, you know, literally hundreds of different extraterrestrial races who are existing on this planet right now, maybe in like underground cities and stuff. Some people would tell you like, yeah, it's absolutely true. And if that's the case, then it's just like Sasquatch is just like another one of these, you know, just like extra characters within this game, like as much as that is just a simplified way of putting it. But yeah, again, you know, like as long as they can keep Sasquatch as kind of like just rid it of its myth, of its magic and stuff, then if Sasquatch isn't real, then, you know, all that other stuff can't be real either. But as soon as the government's just like, okay, you know, or not even the government, but the mainstream, as soon as they're like, oh, Sasquatch is real, that'll open up way too many doors way too fast. And the fact is, most people wouldn't be ready for it. Most people wouldn't actually be able to handle that truth. It would like break them. So again, I think that's where like the Sasquatch mystery is there to be explored for those who are ready to explore it. And so if you're listening to this broadcast and you're at that point where you're ready to receive the gift of what happens when you open up to the mystery of the Sasquatch. And I feel that, again, that the context here that we're creating is that as you do that, it's actually a heart opening thing, and it's an inspirational thing. And it's, again, being able to like understand the bigger picture that we're taking part in. So, all right, Ryan, I'm going to pass it over to you, dude. Thank you for your patience. And let me just bring up your microphone real quick. And so this is Ryan Sage. He's been in past broadcasts. So Ryan, welcome back, man. And when you're ready, go ahead and just say hello and bring whatever you would like to bring to this amazing topic tonight. So,
hey, thanks for having me. Thanks, thanks, Brendon, for holding these talks. And what Nicholas was talking about, that's just so valuable to see it at the transcendental perspective too. I have a few things to share about what I think about it. To be honest, I haven't ever given it much thought. It's definitely crossed my mind before, the Sasquatch specifically, but it's always just been a fleeting thought. But upon reflection for this talk, it is Scorpio season. We're approaching Halloween. It's such a fitting talk. And Terence McKenna, a triple Scorpio, he had a really overarching theme about what these things are. And he related it to UFOs as well, but the Sasquatch would fall into this category. The way that it's appearing, his theory is it's actually disguising itself as a UFO or a Sasquatch as to not alarm us as to its actual form. So that's always resonated with me a lot. I also think like when you're alone in nature, that's going to set the stage for something along the lines of a hallucination or a daydream or some sort of more flexible reality that you're in when you're alone in nature. So it could be like that people like farmers or people in these isolated towns that had all of the forest where these Sasquatch sightings happen. It could be that the Sasquatch itself is simply a legend to lead people to the truth. It could be people discovered like a transcendental truth in nature, and the only way they could preserve what they had found was to invent this creature, the Sasquatch. So that's possibly what's going on with it. I personally have no prior research at all really to the Sasquatch. Definitely fascinating. And it could also be like if you find yourself alone and let's say without a camera or any way to record what's going on, that just increases the chances of something happening. So that could explain why there's such little evidence. Yeah, that's all I have to share for now.
awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of just kind of thinking about it. Of like, yeah, like if Sasquatch was a myth, like what would be the purpose of it? To simply lead people into like the solace of nature, to be able to like reach those states on their own. So it's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah. I could see that. Cool. At the same time, I do think that like it could, if anything, it could be like, it could maybe be both or something. There's a whole nother idea I always ponder about, the idea of like Sasquatch on mushrooms. That idea fascinates me. Just like the whole concept of like running into a Sasquatch in the woods, and Sasquatch like happens to be on mushrooms, and like that's actually like the one of the few times where you'll actually like see Sasquatch is actually when you just like coincidentally like cross paths with them, and Sasquatch is like actually like tripping balls on mushrooms at that point, and they're like, whoa man, like that human, like they're chasing me, man, and like, oh crap, I forgot to like turn on my invisibility cloak or something like that. So it's just a novel idea, but I don't know. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows if Sasquatches have like their own like sacred ceremonies and everything, right? Like maybe there was one report that I again, this was in the Bigfoot in the forest documentary, and it was actually just like one of several reports of like people who actually like lived amongst a family of Sasquatch for like a period of time. And again, this was like way back in like 18 whatever or something like that. But again, you know, there's like at that time, like it's interesting to think how back in the day there could have been so much paranormal-esque type stuff, and even, you know, like UFO type light sightings, alien encounters, Sasquatch encounters, and there was probably like a lot of it, but again, it just like never really got reported. Or if it did, it just kind of like, you know, just kind of got faded into history. But now, as we've kind of like gone into the modern day age, like it's expected that like everything, it should be recorded, everything can be documented. So maybe it's like the Sasquatch encounters have kind of like dialed back a bit, but it seems that, you know, even to this day, like literally like right now, the time of this broadcast, there's a good chance that somebody is like getting spooked by a Sasquatch right now at the time of this broadcast. Who knows? Maybe. We'll see. Like I said, I wanted to get into it a little bit later. I want to talk a little bit about Les Stroud's his experience with the Sasquatch, and he's a documentarian who does the show Survivor Man. And if I can get video footage, I'm trying to like my browser's not loading the video here, but I wanted to be able to show you guys footage of a possible hybrid, a Sasquatch human hybrid, like actual footage. So this is like some really trippy stuff that may actually like just like completely make you shift your pants. So just a little heads up on that. All right, let's pass the talking stick around. We still have, I guess, everybody except for Luna. Luna just joined. So Luna, give me a thumbs up if you would like to talk a little bit about this topic. Cool, sweet. All right, Luna, I'm just gonna pull your microphone up, and Luna, welcome back to the roundtable, and please, by all means, go ahead, passing the talking stick over to you and share us a little bit of your thoughts on the ever elusive, mysterious Sasquatch and what they're here to teach us. So, go ahead, Luna. Welcome back.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little bit late in here and everything else, but I'm glad I was able to join you guys. I was listening on YouTube as well. I do want to input. I love the concept and idea of the spirituality. Towards it, the tells of them. Oh man, I'm just going blah, because it's just the ideas that you guys were coming up with. That they could be telepathic, that they can tune us into ourselves more, if we were more in tune spiritually, and what they can teach us about ourselves amongst anything else is really blowing my mind, actually. Just the idea alone, like I've always really have believed in Sasquatch since day one, like I really have. I've also believed that they could possibly be somehow connected with us throughout history, like, you know, like Neanderthals, for example. So maybe they're a missing link for us, and maybe that's why maybe there's so much talk about them, people having experiences with them, and more telepathic than more, and I guess maybe a combination of telepathic and physical. Which is really fascinating to me. So I just want to hear some more what you guys have to say about this and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Luna. Happy to have you here. So
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So let's just kind of check in. We've kind of gone around the circle here once. I'm trying to literally just show you guys footage of this like hybrid, but like YouTube is literally just giving me the spinning disc here, so it's not loading up. And again, that's stay tuned in the future when we get like a super awesome computer, and then it's just gonna be like way smoother and everything like that. Okay, I'll tell you a quick story about like the Les Stroud encounter. And again, like you can literally look him up on Google, sharing this exact same story. Sorry, just making sure, guys, just drop an 1111 on the YouTube chat to make sure that you guys can still hear me okay. I just want to make sure that things are like running through fine. I'm just trying to run up a image search here to see if there's video of like what I was looking for. Oh, there it is. Yeah, the Chinese Bigfoot hybrid man. Oh man, that's trippy. Okay, I'll be able to show you guys like a bit of actually I might be able to, yeah, if anything I'll just be able to like pull up the image of this in a second. So okay, so quick story about Les Stroud's his Bigfoot encounter, and then a little bit later I want to actually be able to share with you guys a concept for a book that I have, like a children's book about Sasquatch, which I'll share with you guys because it's just kind of a cool concept that will just kind of like open things up for you a bit. But anyways, Les Stroud's encounter with Bigfoot, one of the ones, it happened to him twice. And again, this is a guy who has like a reputation. This is a guy who wouldn't really just like make this stuff up. He is known as a survivor man. He has like a documentary TV series. He's Canadian. He goes out and he spends time in nature, and he goes to like isolated places. It's just him. He brings a camera by himself. So if anybody's gonna like have a Sasquatch experience, it would be someone who would be out there all by themselves. And so one of the encounters that he had, and again, I'm kind of telling you this is like a spooky story kind of thing, was it was when him and his wife at the time were camping up out in the wilderness. And basically it was like late at night one time, and they were in their tent, and then suddenly he could hear something like walking towards the tent. It was just like and basically he's very well versed in knowing what animals sound like, and he was just like, okay, that is not the sound of a bear, that is not the sound of like a mountain lion, that is definitely the sound of something bipedal, something like anthropomorphic, something standing on 2 feet. And then so like he was hearing it getting closer and closer, but they were literally out in the middle of nowhere where there was like no roads for like hundreds of miles, so there should not be anybody out there where they are. And then basically like he was in his tent, and he just kind of did one of those like where it's just like, hey, you know, like we're here, like don't run into the tent, like not knowing what it was. And then like as he did this, the whatever it was just like ran off, and then he didn't even get to see it because he was still in the tent. And by the time he got out of the tent, like obviously it's pitch black, but then like he just heard it like rustling as it kind of like ran off in the other direction. So even just there, that's just like one kind of like spooky story, and like sometimes you hear about it, just kind of like makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. Then the other quick story that he had, and again, this is just like one of like thousands of counts, right, of like all these different stuff. So, you know, really encouraging you guys to go check this out. And then I'll mention the hybrid thing afterwards in a second, and then again we'll just popcorn style around a little bit more. The other encounter he had was when he was filming up in Alaska, and he had been there for quite a while, and then he was like about 20 meters away from his camera at the time, and I don't think I'm not sure like what time of day it was, but anyways, and I don't even know if he could see the creature, but basically like what happened is that this creature started whooping at them. And this is actually like a common thing that you hear about the Sasquatches, is that they have like a whoop noise. They would be like whoop whoop whoop, and again, like that's very much like an ape noise, right? And so he knows like what like bears sound like, what moose sound like, what all these other creatures sound like. And so this creature like literally just whooped at him. It was like whoop 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 whoop. It was just like making that noise, and it just like scared, you know, made him shift his pants. And basically like this creature did this, like whooped at him like 5 times, and he was like close to his camera, but he at that point he like wasn't moving, because again, this is like a professional. This guy has been traveling the wilderness like his entire life, and he's never come across anything like this. And again, this is way out in the middle of nowhere. There should be like nobody else. And then at this point he's like, okay, I'm gonna like go to the camera and at least try and get some audio. And then when he does this, the creature just like, again, just runs off into the woods and just crashes, and you hear it just like running away type thing. And so again, like just there's just like this little story of like just one other person who has had these encounters, and they can't really fully explain them. And he's actually, and I don't know if this is underway, if this has happened, but he is actually he was so moved by this that he wants to do like a documentary series where he's actually going out into the woods to be able to document a potential Bigfoot experience. And literally, you know, what better person than someone who would literally just go out into the middle of the woods, just because that's what you gotta do. You gotta embed yourself out in the nature and everything like that. So again, that's just kind of like one story of a Sasquatch encounter. So the next story that I'm going to tell you, and again, this one freaking blows my mind. Because I think like, if anything, this is like almost like close to some form of evidence if we're taking it at face value. And so basically, this is a story that happened, and this isn't even that long ago. Like, this was in like the 1970s or 80s or something like that, maybe even a little bit later. And this was, and again, I'm just kind of butchering the story, but the general idea is that there was a creature like in China, in this particular region, that was known for like having a presence. People knew of it. One night, this creature actually like took one of like the women from the village and basically like took her away and like had sex with her, doubtfully with consent, and then like brought her back to the village. And then this woman, like 9 months later, like had a child. And this child actually grew up into a full-grown man and lived until it was like 33 years old, but had like the cognitive like sort of like intelligence of what seemed to be like a child. But there is video footage of this man. And so again, like, rather than just sort of being, obviously you can just sort of dismiss it if you were to just be like, okay, this is a deformity, this is like a genetic disposition, and that is actually what we're perceiving here. But if you were to literally just believe the story, and again, just kind of allow yourself to do this, and I know some of you watching on audio, you won't be able to see this obviously, but you can look this up. Look up Chinese Bigfoot hybrid man afterwards, and you'll see this. And so I'm going to bring up the on image right here so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. And I think like once you see it, suddenly you'll just kind of be like, holy, like, whoa, okay, like what is going on here? And so bringing it up on camera, bringing it up on screen right now for you guys to be able to take a look at this. And here we go. So it's up on screen right now. So you can actually see it like up on screen right now, where like this is like still images from a documented almost like news report that they have like of this individual. And again, I'm just not playing the video of it right now because it's just like not buffering very well. But again, like, look at this person. Like, their limbs are like way longer than what is normally expected for like an individual human. Their face looks different, their posture looks different, like their neck is different. And again, just kind of like, given the context of that story, is this literally like, are we literally looking at a hybrid of a human and what would have been the Bigfoot of that region? And if that's the case, then again, like, this is one of the closest forms of some kind of evidence of there actually being like a Sasquatch. And so again, it's just kind of, it's one of those stories that's out there. Obviously, just think for yourself. It's a whole idea of what it is that we're doing here. But I just wanted to be able to share with you guys the fact that like this happened, this exists. And so like, I think that again, like, yeah, like Luna's saying, like, amazing. So again, like, for me, it is amazing, because if we're taking this at face value, then like, holy crap, this is like a very powerful piece of quote unquote evidence. So again, I just wanted to be able to share that with you guys. Look up Chinese Bigfoot hybrid. Again, it's kind of spooky. It's a little bit spooky, right? You're just kind of like, you're checking out and you're just like, whoa, okay. But again, it's either a person who has a genetic disformity, or this is literally like a Bigfoot human hybrid. So crazy stuff. All right. Okay. So just going to close that, and let's just keep passing the talking stick around, guys. So again, let's just talk a little bit more about the Sasquatch phenomenon, and then we'll start to link it into, again, like the bigger experience of like, again, obviously like spirits and paranormal. That's an incredibly broad topic, but we'll just kind of see where it goes. This is all just kind of practice, but again, the context here that we're doing is kind of like just being able to piece together being able to connect the dots so that we can begin to see the bigger picture. And part of that bigger picture, the fact that again, this reality is not as cut and dry as it appears to be. There is a lot more to it, and as we begin to see more of it, we begin to understand a little bit more of our place within it, and as well as that our potential as well. So just kind of at this point, talking stick is open for whoever wants to be able to grab it. So what are some more thoughts on the Sasquatch phenomenon, guys? What are your general feelings even on the Sasquatch phenomenon? So if anybody wants to volunteer to grab the talking stick, please do. And even if you guys have any questions you want to throw towards the team or anything like that, please do as well. And I also had like a list of like all the other names for the different Sasquatches and stuff for all the different regions as well. So does anybody want to volunteer to take the talking stick next? If you guys want to say anything in particular, I'll just wait for somebody to jump in. Okay, you go. Okay, cool. All right. So I just want to give a quick list of some of the names of the different Sasquatches the different names for Sasquatch. Actually, what I wanted to also be able to do is figure out like where the term Sasquatch even came from. Maybe we'll do that in between. Like I feel like the term Sasquatch probably has like a translation to it that I haven't exactly figured out yet. But again, so these are just some of the names of the Sasquatch in different regions. So. Just looking for some of the ones that I can pronounce. So in Pakistan, it is known as the Barmanu. In Canada, in Hasla, Canada, in British Columbia, it is known as Bigwas. In the Hopi tribe, it is known as the Big Hairy Man and also the Messenger. Ooh, take note of that, right? Like the messenger. So again, you know, beginning to figure out like the role of like the Sasquatch again, because I feel that Sasquatch isn't just here by accident. I feel it's playing a bigger part within our shift in consciousness, and hence the fact that we're literally talking about it right now. It is also known as the boogeyman in some areas, obviously. Even the booger man, apparently, is known as the box in some places in Canada. It is known as... Oh, interesting. In some places, it is known as the cannibal who eats dead people. So again, I think there's like different. This is what I mean. That there seems to be many different types of Sasquatches. In the same way, there are different types of variations of, you know, bears and apes and everything like that. And I think some Sasquatches are like literally herbivores, but I feel some Sasquatches might have like a different diet and may even have like a different demeanor. Like there may be some Sasquatches who may be out there who might actually be like kind of violent. But then at the same time, there could be other Sasquatches who are actually like quite sentient and intelligent. And again, and literally the idea of thinking about them as like having families, like that was even the thing in the speaking with Sasquatch. Speaking of Sasquatch, like it was literally talking about the idea of this Sasquatch family that was there, and you know there was like children and stuff too, and this family has existed throughout generations. Just a Chinese wild man. The Crying Beast in southern Ojai, which is again in the 1800s, that goes back to the Devil's Monkey. So again, you can see how it's scared a lot of people, and some people kind of like label it based on how they react to it. The Forest Devil, the Forest Giants, Giganto, Grendel. That's interesting. Like Grendel is like the tale from like that's Danish. Like that's like part of like an old tale. Hairy Bill in Texas. Of course they name it Hairy Bill in Texas. That's funny. Hairy Man, Hairy Woman, or Hairy People. The Hill Monkeys in Oklahoma. The Holla Yella in West Virginia. The Jocko in Canada. The Jimbra in Aboriginal Australia. The Jungle Man in India. The Kakundak in Africa. This isn't even all of them. I'm just like hitting upon some of them. The Motlus in another tribe in Canada. Momo is short for Missouri Monster. That's another version of it. I'm just gonna name a couple more here, and then we'll pass over to Yuga. Old Yellow Top, Canada is another one. Old Skunky Bill in Texas. I like these Texas names they got him. Interesting. The Wicked Giant, the Skunk Ape, the Skunk Demon, Skunky Bill. Keep naming it Bill. Weird. And yeah, there's quite a few. And the Wendigo, that's like another common one. And of course, like you got like the Yeti, which is again just like based on locations and regions. But again, it just goes to show the fact that like literally as long as there have been man, there have been reportings of these other men, these other creatures, these other mountain creatures who have been at the peripheral this entire time, who are they? Why are they here? What are they doing? And how are they actually a part of our journey? Yuga, I'm going to pass the talking stick over to you, and we'll just explore this mystery a little bit more. So, Yuga, go ahead, dude. Any thoughts on where we're at right now?
Yeah, in regards to the Chinese hybrid guy, I first came across that in a documentary that was about the experimentation of the hybridization of chimpanzees with humans, and then that ended up being a giant flop as far as the testing goes, and I think there was some death involved. But from what my research came to find was that that guy ended up just having a severe genetic deformity. And then the one documentary I found that I had referenced upon earlier, what was interesting about that was he was talking about the footprints that had been casted of Bigfoot and how, evolutionary speaking, our footprints, like our foot shape wasn't, if we were built, we weren't built right. And they were talking about how the impression of Bigfoot's foot and going back to the bone density, it made a lot of connections. You'll really need to take a look at that. There's so much information in that one documentary. It's an older one too, and the guy seemed to really, really know what he was talking about. But something I recalled with my experience back in Sedona, that rock that I ended up keeping, what was interesting about it was colloid, and also the way it was, I mean, it was like stone for all intents and purposes, but it had certain like quote unquote key points or pressure points, and you could tell it was something that was meant to be held or used as a tool, not like a stone tool, but it was something more than it looked like. And I tried to find it, I couldn't find it. It's probably at my place still in Phoenix. And looking at some of the bay was how there was something in my research involving meteorites and certain type of meteorites. There was like this kind of granular structure within that stone, and that might be the reason why it kept dinging whenever you hit it. But it had this kind of rough coating on the outside. It kind of like shark skin, for lack of a better term. But it was just so weird how you could actually hold and feel the energy being pushed and exerted through this trapezoid looking stone. And then when I was working with it, going back to taking a stand, the idea that I was kind of given was to imagine standing on this little stone and then having it kind of like disc itself out like the Silver Surfer surfboard, and then just kind of using that as like a little quote unquote spaceship. But going back to Mr. Sir, the information that he had given me and the communication that had been transparent, there was a lot of misunderstanding from his side, from my perception, that he wasn't fully aware of the inner workings of what was going on at the time. And that's about this. It was literally the day the 5G network went on. And I think that was part of the reason why there was some problem with his perception on what was going on our side. But I just wanted to mention that, and I'm probably going to have to dip out for a little bit, eat some dinner, but I'll try to get back in a timely manner.
Cool. Thanks, man. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, man. Yeah, there's still so much more to uncover. But yeah, again, like maybe the hybrid thing, like I guess there's more to research on that. Again, it depends, just kind of like what story you're looking at it through. But yeah, it could be.
Yeah, the documentary that I mentioned, it's called Everything You Know Is Wrong. I think you may have read it, but I posted it in the Discord. That's the guy, the Russian case with the village having the offspring of the Sasquatch.
Okay.
And he has pictures of the skull, and there was some testing done with that. As far as the proportion goes, it was clearly a hybrid in that case.
Interesting. Cool. Awesome. Sweet, dude. Well, yeah, try and get back when you can, because I know like the spirit topic will probably be one where you'll have more to share on that. So cool. All right. Okay. Thanks again, man. Much love. Sweet. All right. Again, just inviting anybody else to be able to jump into the conversation if you guys feel you want to. We currently have Amanda and Luna and Nicholas and myself here in the broadcast. And yeah, again, you know, like the spirit paranormal stuff, we'll just kind of get into that. There's a lot that we can take that with. I did just want to hit upon, and again, please let me know if you guys want to say something next. So just like put your thumb up on camera, and then I'll know to pass the talking stick to you next. One of the things with the, okay, cool, Nicholas, pass it to you in a second. One of the things with the Sasquatch stories, again, I've heard a lot of different stories of like Sasquatch having like benevolent encounters with people. And again, going back to like the telepathy encounters, one encounter, one story that I heard that was really fascinating, it was basically this idea that like one day a Sasquatch literally kind of like let itself not even be captured, but it revealed itself to this local like deputy sheriff. And this was like not even that long ago. This might have been like in the 80s, or I don't know. And again, it's just like, well, why wasn't there any video footage or anything like that? I don't know. I don't have the full story here, but just listen to the general concept. And basically, like, this Sasquatch literally allowed themselves to go into the police department, the police facility, and they had it like behind bars. And the Sasquatch was totally calm this entire time, and it was literally like communicating to them and telling them like what it was and why it was there. And it was being like incredibly just like compassionate and everything. And it basically just like delivered this information to these humans. And then when it was ready to leave, it literally just like got up and like walked through the wall. Like it literally just like phased through a wall type thing. So I remember that story just kind of like really just kind of stuck with me, because I was like, oh wow, okay, right, like the multi-dimensional aspect of Sasquatch, for me, I feel that would make sense. And that's where it kind of gets into this idea of not thinking, you know, thinking of Sasquatch as like similar to almost like a higher dimensional being who's kind of like playing within this dimension to almost be able to be like our big brother who's kind of keeping an eye on us from the woods while still living like a simple life of their own. But again, I think there's like different types of Sasquatch. There may be some that are literally just like primitive, almost very much more ape-like, but then there may be other ones that are very intelligent, telepathic, and quasi-dimensional as well. So yeah, it seems to be that there's a variety of different types of Sasquatch underneath the umbrella of the term. Nicholas, I'm going to pass the talking stick over to you, and again, we'll hit upon this topic a little bit more, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes. So Nicholas, go ahead, dude. What are your thoughts? Oh, hold on, dude. I think we're missing your mic. We can't hear you right now. We got your audio, or hold on. Never mind. I just turned up the wrong levels. There we go. Now you're good. Go ahead. Perfect. All right.
Wonderful. Hear me?
Yes.
Good stuff.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I have a couple things I wanted to bring back to the Chinese man that appeared to have I don't know, some sort of genetic link to whatever you want to say here. I don't really know exactly what to say, but the important fact is the work that the Chinese government has been doing with genetic experimentation and I would just say experimentation. And the important case to bring up would be how Yao Ming's parents were selected and brought together by the state, and there's proof that he was almost bred by the state to have his traits, and then goes on to have such a successful career in life. But that shows the work that the state has been doing in having a hand in genetic manipulation. So they could be responsible for other cases that we don't know about, possibly this case. And then I guess that moves on further into the topic of genetic manipulation and what other genetics they're playing with. Because if there are all these species, if we get on a multi-dimensional plane where we have, I don't know, the Sasquatch people, the Pleiadians, the Nordics, the Avians, the Triangles, the, Sirius star cluster, you got the Arcturians, you got, if we get in that place, then you see all these, the Dracos and the Celtic Pride, and Nice. I'm Irish. Awesome. Awesome. What else? Yeah, when you start getting into that kind of domain, what other genetic links could we have going on behind the scenes? So, any input on there? I could keep going, but I'd love to hear something.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, like the genetic links topic and stuff like that. Yeah, I would say like at this point, considering that there's been plenty of players within the game, that there's probably been like a lot more interspecies breeding than we may even like to believe. But again, it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's hard to. I mean, a lot of it was just be like hypothesizing and everything like that. But no, go ahead, Nicholas. Like,
Sure.
yeah, like I guess. Yeah, like again, just tying it into like the Sasquatch perspective on things. Yeah, do you feel like, I don't know, just go ahead, just pass some talking stick back to you if you have anything else that you want to go on further.
Oh, I did want to mention if we do have Sasquatch DNA, which after hearing that, I believe that we may, because that explains this telepathic connection we have. Because you think of like twins, they share more DNA than your average person, and there's evidence showing that they have a closer shared bond. So if we do have this genetic link with them, then it makes sense that we could have a telepathic connection with them, because our DNA will vibrate to a certain frequency that's shared with theirs. And then trying to think of where to go with that exactly.
That's interesting.
What
What were
other
you saying? Yeah.
what other species?
Well, no, I was just saying, yeah, like like the idea that corresponding DNA would actually create like better pathways for telepathic communication. Like it's an interesting concept. I would think that, rather than thinking like, okay, do we have Sasquatch DNA or something like that? Like I wouldn't even think that it would be quote unquote Sasquatch DNA, but I would say if anything, Sasquatch and humans both originate like from like the same lineage, from like the same, like they were created out of the same oven, so to speak. So like in that sense, it's not like we are part Sasquatch, but Sasquatch and us are part of like something that's a bigger thing, but we do share common traits. Like I you're right. Like I do feel that the if you were to have Sasquatch DNA and human DNA next to each other, that there probably would be there would be like a lot of common strands to the two. So but yeah, like I definitely feel that again, even just within the concept of telepathy and kind of like paranormal and stuff like that, I'm a big believer in the idea that again, like anybody can be telepathic. It's just like the filters that we have that kind of like prevent us from being able to access it all the time. So again, like it would make sense that like a Sasquatch like would have like a natural telepathic ability, and if anything, it would actually be a part of their survival instinct. Like the Sasquatch's telepathic abilities is what would allow them to be able to avoid man and to be able to hide and to be able to even like project fear into a man as like a self-defense mechanism. Sometimes like the Sasquatch may not actually be trying to scare us, but it may just be trying to protect itself. Like what if like someone gets close to a Sasquatch and the Sasquatch is like, oh crap, like I've got a family here that I need to protect. What am I going to do? Right? Like, I don't want this, like this slack-jawed yokel, to use that term, kind of very derogatory term, but I wouldn't want like somebody just like walking up and like accidentally like shooting me and my kids or something. So I'm going to like meet them halfway and I'm going to scare them. I'm going to like freak them out or something like that. And so I think maybe, in some cases, like we get these stories of Sasquatches like freaking people out, but maybe it's like a posture thing. Maybe like that's just a way for the Sasquatch to just be like, get out of my woods. Like there's, we're trying to live our life here. Like you're coming onto our property, like get off my lawn type thing. And it's not like it's actually trying to be like, hey, like I'm going to eat you, but it's just like trying to scare them so that they don't come back type thing. For me, I feel like that actually could be, again, you know, rather than just thinking of the Sasquatch as just like a scary beast, but actually like a cognitive, sentient, intelligent creature who is making these choices for a reason, and also making these choices because, yeah, like maybe they got like a family that they need to protect. Like, it's crazy to think that there's like little Sasquatches out there, even right now, alive in the world at this moment. It's crazy. But yeah, Nicholas, anybody else with any thoughts and stuff like that? Nicholas, I don't know if you want to pass it back to you or whatever, but
Yeah, I was leaving the floor open for a moment. I think that was all some good stuff. I'm not really exactly sure what to say.
no, I hear you, man. Yeah. I think we'll get close to kind of like segueing beyond the Sasquatch story in a little bit, because again, like that's kind of one of the things with the Sasquatch story is that like beyond you know, anecdotal accounts and everything like that, there's only like so far we can kind of get with it. But I do feel that like the place that we want to be able to get to it is kind of where we've already gotten, which again is just being able to shift our perspective from seeing Sasquatch as like this either something that's completely just like made up, but then also being able to see, you know, it as just like a scary monster, to being able to actually see it as like an intelligent being who has the right to be here as equally as much as we do, and again, who has literally been here throughout hundreds and thousands of years. And this was again kind of the idea that I was alluding to begin with, that maybe, you know, Sasquatch type creatures actually exist in other parts of the galaxy, and maybe they serve a role where, again, like they're kind of they're there as like a special branch of consciousness, not only to be able to have its own experience, but also to be able to be like something to keep an eye on the indigenous culture that is evolving there at the time. So again, you know, like maybe this is where you kind of get into this idea of like maybe like Sasquatch are actually kind of like working alongside with like aliens or something like that. Again, it's very much just like conjecture and everything, but yeah, I know there's a lot to it. There's some other stuff I think I was gonna mention at some point. I was gonna mention to you guys just like a little story and stuff, but then we'll just kind of segue this. Let me just make sure my browser's still working there. Checking back in though, Luna, Nicholas, Turner, you guys got any more thoughts on Sasquatch? Any other questions? Do we feel like we've kind of like, you know, just moved through some of the mystery here? Turner, pass it over to you. We haven't heard much from you yet, so Turner, go ahead, dude. Any thoughts on the Squatch? What does the Squatch teach you about yourself? So.
Test. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead, dude.
I'll try to talk a little bit slower. I'm sure the feed's coming in fine on YouTube. But guys on the Hangouts.
I think your microphone's still gonna have that glitchy thing that it had last time, where it like kind of cuts in and out.
Does it?
Well, it comes through fine, and then it just like stops, and then it comes through fine again. So, but go ahead, just give it a shot.
Yeah, it's too. It might be something with the Hangouts, or maybe it's just me. I'm not sure.
Go ahead. We'll just try anyways.
Here, you know what? I'm just gonna unplug the mic and see if that works better.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's. It's a connection thing. Anyways, just go ahead. Just go ahead and talk.
You know, kind of. The fact that we all kind of see the same, you know, different but like similar aspects of it. We kind of relate that back to a lot of UFO and alien sightings, you know, of how we have this like idea of what and other people have shown us it to look like, and then our brains, you know, perceive something they've never experienced before. You know, that's like trying to imagine a color that you've never seen. If you were to try to imagine what Sasquatch was to look like, you know, a Bigfoot to look like, you literally can't imagine to form a picture based on ideas of what you think or have seen or have been shown. If Bigfoot was to exist as an energy, as a being, entirely different than anything that we could imagine it to be. It could, help to reach it just because that's what makes the most sense to our brains. And seeing a foreign animal environment, and then as validation, kind of looking back at what media and movies and other people's experience we actually witnessed or not. I remember hearing about this podcast, Mysterious Universe, another.
Yeah.
The podcast was saying how if Bigfoots are an advanced intelligent species, just makes a camouflage like cloak, Also, they have to worry about getting discussing with you and aliens and other stuff. But how the camouflage would work is that it would just make it, everything we perceive with our eyes is just light reflected off of something. So if we were to look at the camera reflecting off of the cloak, would just be information that our brains perceiving that would just make the most sense. So it is able to take whatever form it needs to make the most sense of how we are.
Your microphone's still so choppy, but it's still kind of coming through, but I know it's just like a little bit annoying. But I'm getting the gist of it.
The psychic ability of putting the pieces together.
Well, even the idea of like Sasquatch being like thinking them as an advanced species is actually like a really fascinating idea. I think like that's like definitely one that probably doesn't cross like a lot of people's
in cultures belief too, of how the most technology wasn't like something we developed.
Yeah, it was like
our phones,
spiritual technology.
Yeah, it's our bodies and it's our minds. So
us being able to affect the field.
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense why Bigfoots are able to perceive all of the innate ability to, kind of slip in between these zones and travel, wherever they need. And to kind of connect to different places in the world energetically.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to almost like think of like, like what if like the Sasquatch are almost like higher dimensional tourists in a sense that are just kind of like hanging out here on Earth because they're just like, yeah, I really want to enjoy like the physical dimension of this, and I want to like have like a family and go live out in the woods and just live a simple life. And it's like, oh yeah, you can do that, but you just have to like be a Sasquatch and make sure that you go invisible every now and then so that the humans don't find you or something. So like honestly, like I feel that there's, again, within like the broad spectrum of the different types of Sasquatch, I feel that there are some Sasquatch that can probably like phase shift out of dimensions, as crazy as that sounds. And then I feel like there's other Sasquatch that are probably just more kind of like wild ape-like creatures type thing. And then they all kind of get classified as one thing. But I do feel that there's like a higher tier of like super intelligent Sasquatch that is out there type thing. And they probably like fly UFOs too. Who knows?
So another thing that I always thought was interesting too was how experiences and reports how closely Bigfoots resemble human behavior. Like have cross-dressed. They've snuck into people's clothes and wore like bras and women's underwear.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Just big. There's stories of people being adopted by Bigfoots. There's reports of by Bigfoots. There's reports of people feeding and befriending Bigfoots. It's just, it's kind of like what you guys were saying before of how the mindsets that we have when we if we perceive them to be something scary or fearful, they naturally just are like that because their power, we're painting them to be a certain way. So Bigfoots are as human as we make them out to be in this sense.
Weird, man. Let's pass the talking stick around a little bit, just because, yeah, your microphone kind of gets a little tedious to listen to, but it's still coming through. But it's just like, I wish it was better.
Yeah.
It's the connection. It's not the microphone. It's just the Wi-Fi or something. So
I have YouTube up on one TV and it's on another.
okay.
So I can get the P.
All right, we'll stay in the chat, dude. We'll pass it back to you as we go. So that's cool, man. All right, thank you, Turner.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. So let's keep again. Okay. So we've been in the broadcast for. Has it been 2 hours? Yeah, I guess it's almost been 2 hours. Almost been 2 hours. And yeah, just again, so I mean, obviously Sasquatch kind of fits into the category of paranormal. Paranormal is just kind of, the fringe of what is normally understood and expected and accepted within society. But again, within the theme of Halloween and stuff like that, there is room within this broadcast to be able to talk about the idea of spirits and the idea of entities and things of that nature. And to be honest, this is I feel, see, this is where it gets hard because it's just that's such a broad topic. And that's where keeping it narrowed in on Sasquatch is easy. Getting into the broadness of this is kind of big. But I want to be able to just invite you guys to be able to just, again, using this space to be able to practice talking about these topics. And so, I mean, kind of we can still talk about Sasquatch, we can still relate it back and everything like that, but kind of opening up into the bigger concept of things. And let's move into the idea of spirits. So I mean, I think that it's beginning to become more understood and accepted that we literally exist in an ocean of energy, and we commonly use this term dimension to kind of refer to the idea that there can be multiple things existing within the same place, but actually on different dimensional energies, different dimensional wavelengths. Frequencies would be one way of thinking about it. And so within this concept, it really begins to open things up again more to this idea of is there what's beyond our sight? What is there that is just beyond the veil? And I think, and I'll just say this and I'll just open it up to you guys, just get your general thoughts on this. There's a big paradigm shift here to kind of move into, and it's one that can be very, in some ways, a bit overwhelming and a bit scary for some people, and I understand that. But it's basically this idea of understanding that we are literally surrounded by quote unquote spirits all the time. That is actually just a part of how reality works. And so again, when we're talking about spirits, this is kind of a general term that we're using to refer to, I guess, maybe the concept of entities that don't necessarily have the same physical body as us, but they still have their own consciousness. They still have their own identity. And they still have the potential to occupy the same space. So, I mean, just kind of trying to put some definition on this, spirits can literally be, just actual souls of humans that are beyond the physical body, but they still exist within the same space and have anchored themselves into a particular space because of the energies that they had to it associated with life. This is where you get into ideas of hauntings and things like that. But again, you can really get kind of broad with this, and then you can start getting into the idea of, does everything have a spirit? And are we talking about elementals? Are we talking about animism? The idea of literally being able to see the spirits in nature. And so again, yeah, it's just it's a broad topic. I feel that, and at this point, I just kind of wanted to be able to invite you guys to think about, let's kind of frame this around the concept of what do you feel the audience should be aware of kind of keeping this a little bit practical, when we're talking about the concept of paranormal and spirits and Sasquatch, what do you feel that the audience listening to this should be more aware of, and what do you feel, you know, the general public could be more aware of, and what do you feel that we're kind of like moving towards, not just to look at this knowledge and this information as just purely entertainment, but to, again, to be able to help us better understand what this reality is and like how we're interfacing with it as well. And again, to be able to understand that, like, can we ourselves be like a bridge between kind of like the seen and the unseen? Do we ourselves have this very unique privilege to kind of like walk between worlds, to be like ambassadors of that space? So yeah, anybody in the chat who would like to just like talk, hold the talking stick next and talk a little bit about spirits and even, again, other stuff. Okay, Luna, cool. We'll pass over to you guys. And then again, guys, like, I think we'll probably do a broadcast a little bit later on specifically about like UFOs. We did do one in the past, obviously, but it's always fun to go back to. And we can talk about that because, again, it kind of like, it's all like, it's not just one, they're not separate, right? So, but in this case, we'll talk a little bit about spirits and even, you know, the ideas of like hauntings and things like that, if you guys want to be able to talk about that. Or even the idea of like sometimes spirits kind of showing up on film. This is where you get into the concept of like orbs. What are orbs? I'll share a little bit of just like what my thoughts are on orbs. But yeah, let's just practice. Again, this is why we're here. We're practicing talking about this. I know sometimes it can feel like it's a little bit overwhelming, but we'll just practice talking about this stuff. So Luna, pulling up your microphone, go ahead, Luna, share with the audience, you know, like what do you feel that they should be more aware of when it comes to the topic of spirits and anything else you would like to bring to the table? Go ahead, Luna.
Most definitely with spirits, and just recently too, just learning more of a Gnostic philosophies and psychology and all that. To me, I think people should be more aware of really seeing spirits as, you know, in a collective whole, kind of to make sense to connect ourselves with the universe, right? If we are the energy and we are the universe, and we're in the third dimension embodying the universe, then, you know, the existence of ghosts and spirits now that should apply to that, to help it, and again, to help make a bridge and understanding towards, okay, maybe this is how we're connected to the universe then, and this is how the universe is us, and vice versa, right? Because everything has an energy, no matter what it is in existence, it has an energy, and as consciousness, it's always flowing through. So in any culture, you can really see that the concept of spirits and ghosts and hauntings and all that are all energies that are produced from ourselves and productions also from the universe. So again, like, kind of just putting those two together in a something like, and I don't think a lot of people actually kind of stop to think about that like either. I never really thought about that too much either. Like, I am a Wiccan, and October is the best time for me to communicate with spirits a lot of times too. I've had wonderful experiences every year, like all month long, talking to ghosts and stuff like that, and it's mainly for me as a Wiccan or a witch there, to give praise for the fact that that they are the birth. They're kind of like energies to rebirth, and they're not really looking at it as death, but they're the energies of our rebirth too as well. There are families. There's so much more than that. So then for Samhain, for Wiccans, for us, that's why we celebrate and celebrate the dead, because in a sense they're the seeds of birth. Without their energy, we wouldn't be alive now, kind of thing. So, and again too, like, I've been learning more about Gnostic learning and all that too, and how it really does tie into how everybody is connected and how we're connected to the universe too as well. So just want to point that out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Luna. Would you be able to, sorry, let me just, yeah, thank you, Luna. Would you be able to maybe expand either now or later on just like when you say that you've like talked with ghosts and talked with spirits, can you share a little bit more about like what that experience is for you, just within a context, so that the audience can maybe understand a little bit better?
Oh, for sure. I got a wicked story to tell after you.
Is there anything you want to share now?
Yeah, really quick, definitely. I know a couple of years ago, I was with a few friends of mine, and out here in Winnipeg, we have this really old Saints cemetery in St. Boniface there. And we were just walking through, and we happened to come across this one headstone there that in the late 1900s, I think it was, when they first built a university in St. Boniface there was a horrible fire that happened, and 12 people died. Um, well, we're sitting here. Well, I'm looking at this tombstone. I remember most of it was French, right? So I'm looking at this tombstone. I'm like, okay, I can kind of understand. It's connected to the fire that happened here with the college and everything else. And I kind of went and mentioned to my buddies. I said, how come their names are not on this here? And I can't really read French either, right? But I'm like, where are their names? Where are their names? So I'm sitting there, and then something I heard somebody talking to me, like a female voice talking to me. And I just happened to have some marijuana on me too, right? I was about to have a toke. And this voice asked me if it could have my road shafter. And I didn't really tell my friends this during this time either, right? I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'm just being schizo or something. Maybe I'm just whatever. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. You can have my roach. And during this process, my buddy finally mentions to me after like I put the roach down and everything else. I'm like, yeah, I put this roach down for this ghost. And my buddy goes like, oh, I found the names of the people that died in the fire. Creepy enough, he mentions all the names, and the last person on there was only one female. And I swear to God, I froze up and I went like, and my buddies go, what? I go, I thought I was just being a stoner or something, but I swear to God, I heard a female asking me if they could have a joint, and I kind of felt bad because it's like, man, you here, have my joint. You deserve it. You deserve my roach, right? And when I told them that afterwards, they were just like, what? And I'm like going like, what? At the same time. So those kind of experiences were really, it's just really awesome to kind of have and interact there and stuff like that too. So again, like it's just, there's one story right there. So I didn't even know there was the names or nothing. And there was only one female that died in there, and I happened to hear her. So it was creepy, but it was fantastic at the same time, right? Like you just got to go, whoa, did that really happen?
Yeah. Fascinating. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Luna. And have there been other, like, you can share this later, but are there other scenarios that you've had where you've like communicated with ghosts and stuff? And again, you can, if you want to share it, if you don't have to share it obviously, but are there more stories there that you might have?
At this moment, I can't really think of one right now on top of my head.
All good.
I probably will have some after for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Awesome. Sweet. Cool. Well, thank you, Luna. And again, like even just for people, listening to this broadcast, like I'm sure like there have been situations for people who are listening to this who may have had, these paranormal experiences where it's just like something happened and they just can't quite explain it. And so, I mean, concept of spirits, and I'll just say this and get ready to pass it over to somebody else. So please let me know whoever wants to pass the talking stick to next. Hold on. I just gotta make sure that things are working fine on the browser here. I think we might have hold on guys, I'm just not entirely sure if the program is going to crash or not. Stand by. If I can get an 1111 in the live chat from anybody, let me know. Otherwise I think this maybe hold on. Okay, now I think we're good. Okay, I think we're okay. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, just drop an 1111 in the live chat, YouTube guys. Just confirm that you guys can still hear us, and I think we're fine now. So within the concept of spirits and everything like that, okay, let's just kind of like look at this. So basically we have this idea that we're here in the physical dimension, but then parallel to this, there are, the geez, okay, again, like this is like all just practice, right? So I'm just like, how do we explain this? I feel that like within today's day and age, spirits may be something that are kind of hard to believe because it's so different. It's so like out there. But if you were to look at the bigger picture of consciousness, I feel that there's actually like a logical idea as to why spirits not even why spirits exist, but why we exist within a plane where spirits can continue to interact with us. And I feel like this is actually going to go like way back to kind of the practicality of when we were just like in tribes and just kind of like hunter gatherer, very kind of like early stages of our evolution, or even just, again, we're not, it's a whole other like topic there about like ancient civilizations and stuff like that. But it's just kind of like this idea that as consciousness, through the possibility of spirits existing and spirits being around us and ghosts and things like that, it opens up more possibility for universe to actually be able to evolve, for universe to actually be able to grow and learn together. So it's basically this idea that after a person has gone through their physical life and they're no longer in the physical, it doesn't actually entirely remove them from the game completely. And so like this is a very powerful idea, because suddenly someone who may not physically be here can still actually influence this reality through their shared presence, that they can like be, there with other people through communicating to them, just like through, again, it's like kind of like a psychic communication with ghosts or something, or it's just like an intuitive understanding. But then also understanding that, and this is where we talk about even within dream class, that again, the spirits can also communicate to us like within our dreams, within our meditations, within channelings. So it's just kind of like opening up to this bigger idea of, if we kind of close ourselves off from the possibility of spirits, then we do that. But if we open ourselves up to it, why is that a case? Why, like, how can that actually help us understand like more of what this path is about? Understanding that like it's not just about us in the physical. Like maybe the spirits who are here with us right now are still playing a role in our story, are still a part of our collective evolution. Like we have like the spirits of our ancestors who are still with us. You can kind of relate it, kind of perceive it from a few directions. Again, I'm just kind of like, I'm in the same boat where it's like we're just practicing talking about these things, and sometimes it's like as you're talking about it, it's like does that make sense? Like, this is a weird thing to try and explain, but again, it just kind of goes to the idea that this reality, to try and compress the entire grandiose concept of how this reality works into the finite limitations of human noises that come out of our mouth, you can understand why there's a bit of a challenge in that. But again, that's part of the game that we're doing. So, but anyways, let's keep passing the talking stick around. Who would like to, Yuga? We'll pass it over to you, and you can give us your thoughts on, again, just kind of like the concept of spirits, the concept of, like ghosts, paranormal type stuff within the context of like, what does the audience need to know? What should they know? What can they know that's going to help them understand, like, what's going on within this reality? So, Yuga, pulling up your microphone. So when you're ready, go ahead. Hold on, Yuga. I think your microphone's glitched out right now. We're just getting like 8-bit crackle noises right now. Yeah, I think we can hear you now though. Yes, that is. Okay, go for it. Dude.
Being a shaman and being a bridge between the spirit world, I have a lot of experience, but I wanted to share something very personal that was very recent. If you remember when I messaged you about my trip to Washington, I was very, very defeated at that point, and honestly, I was borderline suicidal. I was about ready to just turn myself into the other side, and I had something communicate with me. I wasn't too specific. Something had told me, just go to the park. I'll get you some weed, and you have something to smoke, and you'll get exactly what you need. And so I don't hesitate, and I just walk to the park, and then sure enough, there's a guy that walks up to me, kind of a middle-aged Hispanic guy. He just starts talking with me, and then he starts telling me about his near-death experience, how he was in a motorcycle accident. He had me feel his head where he was missing part of his skull, and he was telling me about how he had seen his entire life, how he had spent 17 days with what he called the Celestials, and having had a near-death experience of my own, having perceived a little bit of the other side, I kind of knew what it was getting at. And at the end of his story, I asked him, were you given a choice? And he goes, I've never told anyone this, but when I saw my entire life, the Celestials told me I could either go to the darkness or I could go to the light. And I was like, oh, I already know if I end myself, I'm just going to have to redo this whole damn thing. So that was the first instance. The next day, same thing happened. I'm told, go to the park, there's something you need to see. So I'm hoping I get to smoke a little bit more weed. And had a lot of self-doubt within myself. I was really, really beating myself up for a lot of the things that have happened in my life recently. And I'm walking to the park. I just loaded my pipe. It's a tobacco pipe, by the way. I just loaded my tobacco pipe. I'm like, all right, let's go to the park. Let's see what happens. And as I'm walking there, I kind of have my shoes half on, so the back lip is down. And then I kind of get in my head that, like, do you really want to get caught off guard again? Because there was that time I'd gotten beaten up. I know you remember that. But so it told me, do you really want to get caught off guard again? So I instantly put my shoes on all the way, and then I keep walking a little bit. It's really late at night at this point, and all of a sudden I see this giant dog start running really fast, and then I see this Mexican guy chasing after it. But the dog had something in its mouth. It turns out it was a giant coyote that had attacked the guy's chihuahua, and without hesitation, I just started sprinting right after it, and I ended up saving the guy's dog, and he was very, very thankful. I feel like that was a really, really good experience to share. You want me to touch upon a few other things?
So you're saying that, like, spirit kind of, sorry, I just got to pull my mic up here. So you're saying that, like, the spirit kind of led you to that circumstance where you're able to synchronistically help that other person? Like, is that kind of...
Yeah, because a lot of the internal beliefs that I have, having done the vigilante work that I did, I really felt like I needed to step up and make a stand and get myself involved and do what needed to be done. And that was kind of the big thing for the last few months at that point in my life. And having that reassurance of I'm important and that I'm needed and I have work that I need to do and finish, that really put me back in gear and gave me a lot of perspective and really pulled me out of the slump depression that I had. And after that, I was like, all right, let's get back in dragon mode and let's do this thing. Let's finish this right. And then after that, that's when I really, really wanted to start to get more involved with the paradigm shift community. And I think you've noticed that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So are you kind of saying that, like, I guess in that context, by being able to kind of like be open to spirits kind of like guiding us, it can kind of like help us kind of find our way on our path again?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I had so much self-doubt. I had everything planned out in my head, how I wanted to kill myself and the day and just everything about that. And I was dead set, not to be ironic with my term, but having that experience with that man telling me that ultimately I'd have to redo everything, then having the experience the next night where I ended up being the hero, it really, really gave me the inspiration and that gusto to keep driving forward and do the work as the voice of the dragons.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, you know, just kind of like opening up to the idea that, like, you know, spirits can work along with us to be able to help assist us, and almost kind of opening up to the idea that, you know, spirits can kind of perceive things outside of like that linear perspective. And this is where you can kind of begin to really start like stretching the definition of what spirit actually is. And this is where you can, again, kind of like within this bigger genre, kind of start associating it with, like, you know, angels, guardian angels, even, you know, what people refer to back in the day, or just like higher dimensional entities kind of like coming into contact with us. And I think, again, you know, it's kind of like this idea that we as a human, we're basically just like walking, talking antennas, and we can kind of like tune ourselves.
Absolutely.
And as we do, like, the signals can kind of be coming in, and we can kind of like some people can kind of like control like how we are tuned, and then like some people are just kind of like have a natural operating system where they're already attuned to be able to receive, you know, like the clairaudience and the clairsentience to be able to communicate with spirits. So yeah, it's just a fascinating idea to think about, the idea that like spirits actually exist with their own like sentience outside of this physical reality, because it totally shifts the idea that, you know, consciousness exists in the brain, and it kind of shifts it to the idea that like, you know, consciousness moves through the brain, but it doesn't exist in the brain. It's not a byproduct of the brain, and therefore, you know, beyond this physical body, like how does consciousness continue to exist? And is that, again, you know, like are we, you know, just at what point is something spirit, and at what point is something not spirit? Spirit is such like a broad term, and I think the fact is when you understand that, you know, like spirit is everything. Spirit is like the primordial life force upon which things are built upon. So like even we here within this physical, we too are still spirit, but we're just spirit playing around in these physical bodies, in this meat suit, so to speak. But it's an interesting idea to keep in mind that like, yeah, like there's a lot of other entities both working alongside us, but then at the same time you can get into this other story of understanding, and this is like an important thing for people to understand, and this is where it gets a little spooky, but we don't have to get too spooky about it, of being able to understand that like, you know, like there, it's actually like, what if like what we think of as like quote unquote like possession, so to speak, without getting too into the like straight up possession type stuff, because there's you know, there's reports of that and everything, but I feel like, you know, within the concept of spirits, one of the practical things to be able to understand is the idea that a lot of people may actually almost be like hijacked by like lesser, you know, lower density vibrational spirits, and they're kind of like tagging along inside of our body, and they're actually like operating through us, and then they're feeding off of our energy by like basically like attaching us to bad habits, and they feed off of like our like off our like physical carnal desires, and they feed off of our like even like our sadness and our fear and everything like that. And so again, it's just kind of like this idea that, you know, are we as humans naturally already susceptible to spirits? And if that's the case, you know, what do we need to do in a sense to almost make sure that we have like a good buffer to make sure that the spirits that we are letting in are the ones that we want to be able to let in? And I feel like that kind of comes naturally with through like the self-awareness of who it is that you are, and through that self-awareness also understanding that like it's the permission that you give that allows like spirits to kind of like come into relationship with you. So in the same way, you can kind of, and again, this isn't trying to spook anyone, if anything it could kind of be like looked at from the other side to be inspiring. In that sense, it's kind of like, you know, you can kind of move through this physical incarnation with like a team of spirits working alongside with you. Like who's on your bench right now, like who's in your roster, and you can kind of think like, okay, like who are my spirits that I'm working with? Okay, there's like me, my main self, then there's like my higher self. So you could almost say like every one of us always has like our self as our guardian angel, as one way of thinking about it, which I think is fascinating. And then you can think like, okay, I've got like my grandparents who are with me, I've got like my dog who passed on who is with me, I've got like my ancestors who are with me, kind of thing. And so you can really start to pick and choose like what spirits you kind of want to work with, and then allow their energy to kind of like continue to build up into what it is that you're bringing into the world. And again, the other side of that is also realizing that until you kind of create your boundaries, or if you're like not in the best like vibrational state just in terms of your health, then, you know, there is the case for like some people to literally be, again, kind of like susceptible to being like hijacked by spirits who are literally just going to try and like feed off of our energy through putting us into like lower dimensional habits, lower frequency habits. And again, you know, that's like just like related to it can be related to a lot of things. There's a concept here, I'll just kind of throw it out because it just creates some context. There's a term called loosh. which is like a term referring to like energy that is like harvested from humans by like other dimensional entities. And this was a term that I think it was Robert Monroe actually coined it. But again, it just kind of like opens up into this idea that like we as humans, we naturally produce this energy all the time, referred to as loosh, just simply by being alive. And so like on a higher dimensional plane or on a multi-dimensional plane, there's actually kind of like this other story going on where we as humans are actually being like harvested for our loosh by other dimensional beings, by like other spirits. And this isn't even like some sort of crazy agenda. Like this is actually just like a byproduct of the fact that you can't have this reality without all this spirit stuff being a part of it. Like I don't think you can have a physical dimension without there being quote unquote ghosts. Like I think it's just a part of the formula. So again, it's like, what if it's actually normal? Like what if it's normal, but at the same time, what if it's like the idea of lesser spirits hijacking us? Like that, don't, to opposed to thinking that is like a negative thing, you can look at that as an empowering thing to be able to be like, oh crap, you know, like knowing that that's a possibility, that I could theoretically be hijacked by lesser spirits. That brings me more into my own sovereignty to make sure that like I'm not allowing that, or like I'm moving beyond that. And again, and I think that comes through just like being able to shift our own health and a lot to do with like our even just like our pure like power of will and thought, to be able to like create these like force fields around ourselves. I know it gets a little like woo woo and airy fairy and stuff like that, but again, just kind of trying to piece together some of the puzzle here. Who wants to go next, just to kind of share some thoughts on again, like kind of like the concept of like spirits? You know, what are we talking about here? What does the audience need to know? What's the practical side of this? Anybody else want to jump in? Amanda, I'll pass the talking stick over to you. So Amanda, go ahead, and I'll be keeping an eye on the live chat as well. So Amanda, if I got your microphone up if you want to. I think you were waving at me, right, Amanda? You just got to unmute yourself, I think. So let's give it a second for that. Amanda, if you're there, just let us know. It might be a small glitch in the matrix. All right, let's if who wants to go after Amanda, if Amanda might not be able to go? Nicholas. Okay, cool. All right, let's pass over to Nicholas first, and then we'll pass over to Amanda as soon as we hear from her. So yeah, go Nicholas, go ahead, dude. Just general thoughts on, you know, the concept of spirits, and again, just trying to keep it like we're almost trying to like boil this very, very broad topic into a way that's logical, sensical, you know. Yep. Hold on, let me
I'm gonna try to keep it quick.
Perfect. All right, okay, go ahead, and then Amanda, if you can hear us, we'll pass it over to you in a second if your audio is working. Go ahead, Nick.
All right, sounds good. I would say that like two key things to keep in mind are, one, that all is self. So all these different entities, almost, they're still only going to be reflections of your internal self. So all these different states that we can internally enter. Sorry, I just said the same thing like multiple different ways. But then two, that everything's vibrational. So all of these different entities and their influence is just going to be a different vibrational force that you're either harmonizing with or is having an influence, but you may be in a different place energetically. So there may be tension there, or like something that a point of contention. But if you are harmonizing with it, then that's where the possibility for possession, or the possibility for just even possession, I feel like has a negative connotation to it, but there can be a way that, like, let's say you're just having a really, really great day and your higher self is working through you, and you know that it's a pure positive connection with a positive entity. You could say your higher self that's having that influence through you, that you're almost like a passenger along for a ride in a flow state, you know? So those two, I think that was good. And then my other thing was, it's getting real late, so I gotta go. But I wanted to thank you all for being here with me, and this was a wonderful first experience for the community, and or with me in the community. So
Awesome.
I appreciate it.
Sweet. Thanks, man. When you get a chance, send me a message over Discord, and we can just keep in touch, and I'll send you the link for our Discord server as well. So,
Wonderful. Sounds good.
Welcome back anytime. Appreciate you being here, man.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, dude. Yeah, and again, totally, you know, just like with what Nick's saying there, you know, I think like the concept, like again, we do kind of like stigmatize this idea of like quote unquote possession as being this negative thing. But what if we're looking at it from the idea of like calling in spirits with intention? Does that change the story? Again, you know, like what if you were to like call in like the spirit of like, you know, like one of your archangels or something like that, and then you kind of, again, it's almost like you kind of like switch to the passenger, where there's kind of like another degree of consciousness kind of like acting through you without like giving up full sovereignty or whatever. It's just an interesting thing. We'll get to some other stuff in a second. I'm gonna pass over to Amanda and also about like just like, you know, the idea of this is where we get into the spooky stuff of like spirits actually being able to interact with the physical world and how they can do that. Because again, I think the fact that spirits can interact with the physical world, be it through electronics or like air pressure or like closing cupboards and things like that, just kind of shows you that like there's something there. Like we might not define it as like physical, quote unquote, but there's something there. There's like a weight to it. There's a presence to it. And again, it might not be within our visible spectrum, but it seems to be around us, and it seems to still be able to like interact with this dimension. So it gets like really trippy in its stuff. And again, I think this is where like a lot of it can be looked at from the side of being like, oh, spooky hauntings, but then there's like another side to it where it can get like very like shamanic and actually very ceremonial, and you can begin to understand why the whole presence of a spirit would still want to be able to like interact with this physical reality. Amanda, I'm gonna try bringing up your audio. Let's just see. Amanda, just double check. I think you should be good this time.
Sorry, my phone actually died.
Oh, okay. Your phone died. Oh my God, Amanda, I'm so sorry to hear that your phone died. Hopefully it'll be okay. Its spirit lives on though, right? So, all right, Amanda, go ahead. Passing the talking stick over to you. What are your thoughts on spirits, and what do people need to know?
To really remember is, you know, tap into your childhood. Remember, like how you actually could remember how, like, when you were a child, you really did tap into spirits. Come get her, please. Speaking of children. Hi. Hello. She wants to say hi. Hi.
Hello. Oh, cute.
Hey. But just remembering as a child, you know, you really were more tapped into the spirit realm than when you're an adult. I feel like most people know there's like a cusp at like 11 to 12 years old or something like that, where you kind of lose a lot of that connection to the spirit realm. And trying to remember that, I remember really vividly, actually. Like I was super tapped into like the nature realm and the fairies and all that. But what I really want to talk about is when I was listening to you, Brendon, you were talking about like how you can somehow get not to get too spooky like you said, but how you can be on this like super tapped in mode and just be like kind of like this open gate for all these other entities to come in. I've been there and it was really weird, and I'm still processing it. I actually posted on a group on Facebook a few months ago about it because I am literally still processing what happened. It was really creepy. So anyways, just to let you know, what happened was I was a student at this cosmetology school, and I was just like super happy, just like beaming with all potential and like just so happy to be learning and doing things and just like Ayurvedic and, you know, naturopathic stuff. And, you know, I was just tapped in. And throughout my schooling, there was an instructor there named, I'm not going to say her name, but she kind of tended to have a liking for me and like kind of treat me like what do you call it, like teacher's pet or whatever. You know, we would talk and stuff, and we actually started seeing each other outside of school. I would be like at a bar or whatever, and I'd see her and I'd be like, oh, why can't we be friends? And she'd be like, oh, soon enough you'll graduate and whatnot and we'll be friends. I was like, but it's like we're like so tuned in, or, you know, like I thought that it was just like this weird connection of like positivity of like, oh, she's just like me, you know. And she was very much in the psychic, I don't know, scientific psychic realm. She had this like crow tattoo that was beautiful on her arm, and she would talk about it and um, how smart crows were, and you know, whatever. Anyways, so fast forward, I finally graduate from school. About a week to 2 weeks later, we start hanging out, and we go out and get some drinks, and she keeps buying me drinks. And we're talking, I start talking about tarot, and I told her, I was like, I'm not sure like how much of this kind of, you know, esoteric, magical side of myself I want to bring into my clients and whatnot. I was trying to get advice from her on like what she thought as far as like how much of that side of myself to bring into my professional life. And she basically was like, yeah, they're not going to take you seriously. Don't do that. Go back to her place. She gives me some ciders, and she's like, yeah, so here's my tarot deck. It's like, what was it? Salvador Dali deck or something. It was gorgeous. She had it in this beautiful box and everything. And we're hanging out, drinking ciders on the patio and just talking about all the things that I'm are really in realm with, you know, what we talk about, like in Discord chat and stuff like that, like Paradigm Shift Central, like, you know, how to better ourselves. And then all of a sudden things just shift. They just take like a plummet into the dark side, and she starts talking about how she can turn lights off, and how she hates who she is, and she's like this dark being. There's not enough death here, and just like everything goes really dark. And I'm just like kind of in shock. I'm like, I thought we were having a really on the same level conversation. I was like, I'm still a light being. I even said that at one point. I think I was just like, I'm still a light being. I don't know how to commence this conversation. It gets really dark. Like it gets to the point where she like tries to talk me into like incriminating my friends and talking about just really horrific bad things, and I'm just like completely mindfucked, to be honest with you. It's like, wow, what happened? And I'm still like thinking about how she was just like, I just hate myself. I'm such a dark thing. I just can't even name what I am. And you know, the thing is I was in such a positive, like open space in my life where I was just like ready to accept anything, you know? And I thought she was like me, but she wasn't. And I'm still trying to figure out what the hell she was. But I've been told by this one person online that she was.
Sorry, Amanda, I think your audio's just like coming, it's a little bit hard to hear you. I don't know if you maybe just move it a little bit closer, move it a little bit less. Yeah, like as you're moving it away, it just kind of phases.
So sorry, I was probably holding my finger.
Oh, it's cool. You're into it. So yeah, go ahead. Just kind of like summarizing this like within the context of spirits and stuff. What do you take out of this?
I don't know. It's just some sort of dark entity. I don't know. I still feel like I need to warn my friends about her, because I know my friends hang out with her and stuff like that. I'm just like, I am pretty sure that she's like something. So what I was going to say is I was talking to someone online about it, and she was like, I I'm pretty sure she's like an anti-angel, like whatever the opposite of angel or celestial being is, that's the opposite of it. And I was just like, I don't even know what to call it. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what to call it. So, I mean, what I want to say with all of that is just be careful. Like, we are very open people and we just want to share and stuff like that. Like I said, I was telling her about my tarot and I was just like trying to get advice from her. And I was just super excited to be, you know, like on the other side of education and whatnot. And what I just want to say is be very careful when we're interacting with different beings, because every once in a while we attract these, I don't know what they are. They're just like dark magnets or whatever. I don't even know what to call them. I hope you guys can come up with some ideas in the chat, or, you know, maybe you guys here have some ideas of what that was. But, you know, just opening ourselves up opens ourselves up to dark things and bright things. So I'm super excited to be a part of Paradigm Shift Central, but I just want, you know, everyone to keep in mind that there are, you know, still things to be wary of.
Yeah, that's
when
one.
open.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I mean, again, you know, I've definitely noticed that like there's a lot of variety in terms of like the experiences here that humans can open themselves to. Again, I think in a lot of cases like that, you know, like what is the like, you know, what is like if people don't want to get possessed, so to speak, I think being able to just like really focus on like their own balance is really important, as well as also kind of like getting into this mindset of like these quote unquote spirits, if we're talking about it from like a kind of like a you know, a bit of like a quote unquote negative angle. They feed off fear, and they only have as much power as you give them, would be one of the ideas. So I mean, like for me, like I don't feel like I have to worry about like possession or anything like that, but at the same time it's like not something that like I'm constantly worrying about or thinking about. So I mean, again, you know, like if you're just like, you know, just like swimming in all sorts of this type of lore, and you're constantly kind of like looking into these things and opening yourselves up, maybe like it kind of like invites these experiences into your life. But at the same time, if you're just literally just like be like, okay, yeah, you like I observe that there's a possibility for that, but you know, I got my focus on other things, and I feel like it kind of just allows you to keep moving forward without it immediately being a part of your reality. So I feel like there's a bit of you know, as spirits, I feel that we have the ability to like provide consent for these like other entities to be able to like interact with us on many different levels. But again, I feel like sometimes that consent can be overridden if we're like at just like a state where we're already super susceptible and like a lower vibrational state. And again, I use that term in a very general sense, but generally it kind of like correlates to just like our overall like electromagnetic field, which is like a reflection of like our physical health and our emotional well-being as well. So again, it's like people who are in states of depression or something like that, like maybe they're more susceptible and stuff. But then again, what if you look at it from the idea that like this in itself isn't necessarily a quote unquote negative thing, but it's actually like an important teaching process within a bigger picture. Like what if like sometimes we do find ourselves kind of going through this process of being like, you know, like what is that part of me that doesn't feel like it's fully me, and you know, like how can I kind of begin to like alchemize that to be able to like regain the sovereignty that I feel that I seek. And again, I'm not an expert on this topic. Like I'm right in the same boat with you guys, where we're trying to explain things that are like a little bit outside of our sight based on conjectures and experience and folklore and things like that. But the fact is that like these stories have been present again with our human existence and history endlessly. And I think the mystery is just like, you know, it's there, but just make sure you don't get like, don't get lost in the abyss of it, so to speak. Yeah, please do, Amanda. And then anybody else, we got Luna and Ryan. If you guys want to say something next, you can get ready for it. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thanks. Well, like you made me think more about it, and I was like thinking about how like you can't attract anything that's not on the same of attraction. And the thing is she was somewhat on the same vibrational level as me. Like I was super attracted to her, like on a vibrational level. And so that's the thing, I guess, where that whole thing comes into is that, yeah, you literally can't attract anything that's not on your vibrational level, or you've got to be in the same vibrational realm, whatever you're attracting. So, like you said, if you're in the super low level, yeah, you're just going to attract low level beings and whatnot. But, I don't know, she still blows my mind, but it was like a completely, vibrational, I don't know, it was weird. It was just like, it felt like it was like the antithesis of me. And I don't know, like, if that's a good thing. Maybe seeing your like opposite is a good thing. Like maybe seeing someone who you're super attracted to on that vibrational level, but they're on that opposite dark side of you. Like I think sometimes that I'm like a closet goth or whatever, but like maybe she really was that other dark, perfect opposite of me, and I don't know what that means. It still just blows my mind every day when I think about it. But uh yeah, just I guess bringing it back to the law of attraction and how we can't really attract anything that's not on the same vibrational level as us anyway. So just keep your vibrations super high, guys, and let's keep going. Let's keep shifting paradigms.
Right. Yeah. And again, like I think it's like we attract what we need at the same time. So I mean, again, I think rather than just being, I don't think it's necessarily always about like, oh, we're always trying to like be one certain thing. It's more so like we're trying to always maintain a certain degree of awareness wherever we may be. Because the fact is that like sometimes the universe will throw us into like a lower vibrational state in order for us to go through the experience of learning how to get out of it, type thing, right? Like that's the real that's the real gift of the universe. It's like, okay, you've developed these skill sets where you're like cognitively able to, adjust your perspectives on any given circumstances. And rather than just like maintaining a situation where it's just like, oh, this is perfect, easy, and fun all the time, every now and then the universe is going to like give you that like curveball where it's going to like put you to the test. And then it's going to be like, here, like here's that one day where everything's going to go freaking wrong, and it's going to be an opportunity for you to be able to show up. And like, will you kind of like move into that kind of just get like swamped by like the negativity of those like processes? And again, I use the term negativity in a very non-bind, like it's kind of like a general sense. But again, like just kind of reading in the chat, I know Turner's talking in there as well. And again, it's just this idea that like it is within our states of like illness and dis-ease that we actually learn a heck of a lot about like ourselves and being able to like see what it is that we want to fix. And so again, like I think this is actually really interesting because this is where you start to get into the idea of literally going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of people who would talk about quote unquote demons. And it really gets into this idea of like, demons appear as something scary to us, but what if on that higher dimensional plane of existence that like those demons are serving a valid purpose? Like they are there, they are there to call us into our light. Again, like that is, I feel like that's kind of what a big part of it is. Like the darkness inside of us is there to call us into more light. The demons that we experience and sometimes embody and sometimes are possessed by, or whatever we want to use that term, call us into more of our light. Because it's just like, oh, okay, like now this is something that like, ways of the old day, then like that could actually be something that's helping you become more aware of your self-sabotaging habits. And then again, once you kind of get to that state where you can't ignore it anymore, then you fix it. And if that demon hadn't shown you those parts of yourself in the first place, then maybe you never would have alchemized that later on. So it's, again, it's like kind of like, can we make that shift? And again, kind of like that same thing of like thinking about what we've talked about earlier with Sasquatch. Is there a way for this to be able to open our hearts even more? Is this a way for us even to be able to think about the concept of ghosts? And we can get into this in a second, ghosts and, you know, spirit hauntings. Can we empathize with it? Can we see it from that higher perspective where, again, instead of whereas like with most people, you know, they would walk into a room and if something spooky happened, they'd be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, that's unusual, that's unexpected, and it scares the crap out of me, and I run away. But then, you know, what if other people can approach that same quote unquote haunting and literally be able to understand it from a higher perspective of being able to like empathize with what is happening to the spirit and being able to like see it as like an equal to them. Like that's crazy to think about that, to think about being able to just show up to a ghost haunting and being able to see the ghost as an equal, and how like that energy may be able to help resolve the haunting process, so to speak. One thing I'll just mention here real quick, and then again, I just want to pass it around. I think either Ryan or Luna, if you guys have something to say, in terms of like hauntings and stuff, one concept that really made sense for me, that's really kind of like put things together, really goes back to like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it basically ties in with a lot of stuff that we've talked about in dream class. And it's basically this idea that, you know, right now we're awake, or at least we perceive ourselves as being awake. And we go through this existence, etc., etc., etc. And then when we die, there's an actual point where within the process of us dying, where it's almost as like we're like entering into a dream, and depending on our state of consciousness that we move into as we die, it will actually affect how our spirit perceives itself after that death. And basically what can happen is that depending on the consciousness of the spirit at that moment of death, that spirit can actually get like into a state where from their perspective, they don't even realize that they're dead, and they're still kind of just like living out the habits that they had consciously kind of operating through like a mechanical operation of patterns. And they're living it again and again and again within like this spirit realm, which is still within this space. It's just like in another dimensional frequency of it, but they literally don't know they're dead, in the same way that when you're in a dream, you don't know that you're dreaming unless you're lucid. So in the same way, think about how you felt in a dream where you're just kind of going along with the actions and you're not even really thinking much about it, and you're not really questioning the fact of like where you are. Now imagine that same perspective and empathize how it would make sense if a spirit was literally in a situation where like they were still in their house, but they didn't even know that they were dead. Like they thought that they were like still alive, and they're just kind of like stuck in this like waking, sleepwalking state, which is actually like another version of quote unquote death or something like that. So again, and that's kind of going back to the Tibetan Book of the Dead in that sense of just kind of trying to being able to understand like what's the deal with spirits. And again, I think this is where you kind of get into the ideas of hauntings, when you get into the idea that like at the time of death, the spirit might have passed with like a lot of anguish. Like there might have been like a lot of chaos at the time of death. It could have been a very violent death. And because it wasn't like this peaceful transition, then the spirit kind of like gets all confused, like literally. And it's weird to think about that the spirit could get confused, or that the death process can almost be like interfered with. Like there's actually like a good way to die, and then there's kind of like a less than ideal way to die. And sometimes when it's less than ideal, it kind of like it changes the way that the spirit transitions. And if it doesn't fully transition, then it can actually like remain in this space. And this is again kind of like where you kind of get into the concept of what we recognize as hauntings, or you know, and spirits associated with like different energies of different buildings, all sorts of different stuff. But again, I think the topic of like ghosts and hauntings and everything like that, it's always one that I've always been fascinated with as well. So again, it's just because it's the mystery of it. It's just like, wait a second, you know, like there's either A, absolutely nothing to it, or B, there is something to it, and this reality is not as cut and dry as it appears to be. So let's kind of like take it a little bit down that rabbit hole. Just checking in. Luna, did you want to say something next if you would like to? Yeah? Okay, let me just pull up your microphone and we'll pass the talking stick over to you. Okay, Luna, when you're ready, go right ahead.
Well, I want to mention about the near-death experiences and stuff like that. I myself won about 6 years ago, due to the fact that to kind of give a outline of it. Um, I have a pacemaker now. I was born with a defective heart, but I went to the hospital a week prior before I got this implanted in me for my first attempted suicide. I guess subconscious suicide, you want to call it. And I remember I was in there for a week, and the doctors were mentioning that they're keeping track of my heart because they noticed that it was irregular. So they just kind of figured maybe because how I tried to do my suicide with Medicaid or these pills, kind of cocktail, I guess you want to call it. So they thought maybe it was because of that. But I remember the day I was supposed to be released. I was getting all excited and ready to go home and everything, you know what I mean? And I remember I got so really tired, and I looked up at the clock, and it's creepy how I remember a lot of this detail, but I remember I looked up the time. It was just after 9 o'clock. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go home soon. It's gonna be great. I'm just gonna kind of go to sleep and wake up, and it's gonna be all good. Now this is where I had my an actual near-death experience. And again, I can remember everything, absolutely everything. I remember I drifted to sleep afterwards, and I was walking in what felt like, it's kind of hard to describe, but it was darkness, but it felt like even not even just time, but even existence didn't even exist there. I just kind of figured it was my normal nightmares or whatever. I'm just what, in my head I'm like, it's okay. This is just normal. But what was weird, I noticed the atmosphere around me was a lot more different and suffocating and empty and just nothingness. And his voice came out of nowhere and starts talking to me and starts saying, you're not dreaming, you're not dreaming. And I went to the voice, and I kind of started swearing at it. And I was like, like, fuck off, I am sleeping, I'm dreaming, of course I am. Fuck, what are you talking about? Shut up. And it just kept repeating that to me over and over again. And then at first I thought, wow, that was a really, really weird dream, even for myself. And again, I was about to brush it off. Within the first 2 minutes, I was awake. The doctors came back in, and they told me immediately, they go, I'm sorry to tell you this. And at first I'm like, what do you mean, sorry to tell me this? They're like, well, you went to third cardiac arrest when I went to sleep. I was basically dead for 6 minutes, then 12 seconds. Generally speaking, after the 6 minutes, I shouldn't have been alive. So I luckily got saved there too as well. And they said they had to resuscitate, shock me back to life. When they told me that, I completely broke down crying, because you're right, it did wake me up to a new whole perspective in general, just in the factors of a lot of my life being chaotic in itself. So death, for example, was one thing that I kind of felt I wasn't in control of, and everything else. But they told me when I was dead, so that's when I realized that moment, that dream that I thought I had, it wasn't a dream at all. It was my death. Secondly, the darkness and the emptiness that I was in actually was how I kind of perceived the world to be as. And so when I kind of realized there afterwards, through a lot of thinking and talking and self-realization, that I created that space because I enclosed myself and my soul and my mind so much within this darkness and within myself that I actually literally put my own self through to my death that way too, by closing myself off to the world and everything else. And thirdly, the voice now, this is the weirdest thing. The voice that was talking to me actually, and I believe to this day, was my older brother, who died of instant infant syndrome 2 years before I was born. And I've always believed in my heart, even though I've never met him before, and I've had other close experiences where his entity, I never really get to see him, but I know him. I feel like I can trust in him. And I do believe it was him that very moment to guide me out of where I was then and there. Because again, I mentioned that I was over 6 minute mark, which would be considered, I should have been dead right there. And if he wasn't there telling me I wasn't dreaming to distract me from. And I think too that if I got so concentrated on where I was, because again I was kind of picking up on the environment being different around me, and then he was kind of distracting me from that by going, hey, you're not dreaming. He really did honestly save my life, and I got my tattoo right here to my ankh as well, just for a commemoration for that. And I thank him every day too as well. It's like, I say, big bro, if that's you, man, you're still in my heart, even though I never got to meet you in my entire life. But I know through me that you can live through me, and you saved my life right there. And that really just really opened my mind to a whole new world right then and there, and everything else. Yeah, I just wanted to share that there.
Thank you, Luna, for sharing that very, very powerful and personal story. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like the whole concept of like near death experience definitely fits again like within paranormal. And I guess, if we're trying to define para, like that would literally just mean, kind of like outside the regular realms of normal. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's and again, like it's very powerful to hear like how that story has continued to play a part within your life, like how like within there, like you're in that space where you have that communication with, as you were saying, you identifying as like the spirit of your brother, and how that's like continued to play a part of your story to this day. That's very powerful. And again, I think it's as us here within this physical, I think it's very valuable to kind of reflect on the different ways in which we can kind of like create that line of communication between ourselves and those who are not here in the physical. And this is something that I've talked about a lot in different ways, even in relation to like with my grandfather passing, with my like dogs passing and stuff like that, of like how we can kind of create like items and talismans that we kind of like have like an energy that we associate with them, and we can kind of use that as like a way to kind of like open up our thoughts into that space, even if it's just to reflect with gratitude. You're just kind of like taking a moment where you're just like, hey, like I'm thinking about you today and stuff. And then depending on the person at the time, and depending on like their unique like tuning, their unique antenna, it's interesting to just sort of hypothesize the idea of like, yeah, like how vividly can spirit actually communicate through to us? Because this is where you get into the idea of not even just channeling, but people who consider themselves to be mediums and things, and like how they hear spirits, and be like, oh, like your grandfather says hi, your grandfather says, you're passing on messages and stuff, and how they actually hear it. Again, not necessarily being a medium myself, I mean, I am in different ways, but I imagine in some ways for those mediums, it may not be so much like, oh, they're literally hearing a voice in their head, but it's more so they're almost like hearing it in their heart, in a sense. And that's an interesting thing to just kind of think about, the idea of like, can we listen to spirits within our heart? And even in that sense, it's kind of basically just like inviting us to kind of connect to our connection with everything. So even in this moment, and I'll just say this and I'll pass the talking stick around next. If you're like, hey, I want to connect with my past, with my grandparents and even with my ancestors, one of the ways that can happen is literally just by connecting with your heart, by connecting with your breath, by connecting with like your presence in this moment, and kind of like that higher conscious perspective of like your connection to all things. And then like through that, as you kind of open that gate with gratitude, you can kind of like create even just like you're just putting out the message, and then you're just kind of like assuming that it's being heard, and just kind of like welcoming in that reciprocation of gratitude into your heart. So it's interesting to think that, in a lot of ways, we don't really live our day-to-day lives with spirit kind of by our side, even though we do. And are there ways for us to kind of like adopt it, so it actually becomes like more common and actually beneficial? So it's not even like this spooky thing, but it actually becomes almost normalized. And to actually think about like how the spirits of, example, our ancestors, our grandparents, can actually kind of like help guide us. And this is something that with like other cultures in the world, it's not that uncommon. You would think about like in other parts of Asia, and you would kind of like imagine like this idea of like you're going about your day-to-day life, you're living your life, and your grandparents are kind of like literally like watching over you not even just like in metaphorical sense, like in an actual literal sense, and then that kind of just becomes like a part of your perception of this reality. And it's just an interesting thing to think about, because I think we in the West, we close ourselves off from spirit, because of the fact that, like, oftentimes spirit, the concept of spirit has often been associated with spooky stuff, with horror stuff, with something to be scared of, with something to keep ourselves closed off from. And I think there's a validity to that, but I think it really depends on like how you're showing up to the discussion in the first place. But again, it's just kind of, is there a space within our culture to think about like how we can kind of incorporate our awareness of spirit in a practical way for our day-to-day lives. Maybe Ryan, if I can pass the talking stick over to you, maybe you want to just like take a couple things to say. So cool. All right, Ryan, I'm gonna pass the talking stick over to you guys. Let's keep this conversation going. We'll wrap it up within the next like maybe like 25 minutes, give or take. So Ryan, go ahead, dude. What are your thoughts?
Hey, you mentioned whether there really is a place in our culture for this type of awareness, and I think that it's very much human nature to explore all frontiers, right? We're beings of the creative pursuit of knowledge and going to every area. That's like what being human is all about. So I feel one of the truly unconquered grounds is the world of metaphysics and spirituality. The amount of resources and attention that we could be putting to it could be a lot more. I don't know if it really should be a lot more. I think we're going at a great pace, but either way, my point is it's totally underexplored, in my opinion. I have something actually really amazing to share with all of you. Luna, you're going to be amazed, but all of you, Luna mentioned her brother. And in 2012, I know a lot of people started noticing shifts in consciousness, and this was a huge year for me. I can say that I officially started connecting with people based around spirituality. And as soon as that connection became strong, I had the biggest tragedy of my life. I went from being a middle child to an only child. I lost 2 brothers in 2012. And this was like literally as I was awakening spiritually. So I started asking all of these questions like, what is a spirit? What is the potential of communicating with people who have passed on? What is it all about? And all I can tell you still to this day, it's very mysterious and to me, largely unanswered, to be honest. I do think, though, I've gotten a few ideas of like some of the things that I have experienced that are like similar to this, so I'll share them. I think the idea of being in an experience with a so-called spirit, we have to be open to the idea of it being any of the following things that I'm about to list off, because I think that these are far more common, but could seem similar. That we're actually experiencing the energy of somebody close to us who's alive right now. Just that it's coming through a way that we think it's a spirit. There's other forms of disembodied consciousness, and people would call these angels or demons. But what actually started to make a lot more sense to me was maybe it's something like a part of your body communicating to you, or even individual chakras trying to bring you to the next level of your growth. But at the end of the day, the main point that sort of stuck with me over these last, I guess it's been like 6 years, is that we're all part of one healing process. And in that healing process, there's a really diverse range of like experiences that we can go through, depending on, in many cases, like what we welcome into our life in terms of like possibility and imagination. But sometimes, man, there's no filter, and some people just have these crazy experiences of sort of the metaphysical spiritual world. And a cool idea, I guess this is sort of touching on, someone was mentioning like the Anunnaki, or our humans being like a hybridized race. Something that's come through recently is that these depictions of like giant people or large-headed Anunnaki people may have simply been humans who had awoken their crown chakra. And that's just how they were symbolized, as larger beings. And I think that's a good way to bring it back home, because with all of this metaphysical stuff, I know I personally, you can be stretched a little thin, to put it simply. And I think it's so important just to remember like the miracle of being alive here right now. And that's why I think it's so awesome what you're doing, Brandon, with like the whole shifter consciousness, that we are literally in a game right now, and it's about interacting with our environment in a way that acknowledges that. And yeah, it's the start of something huge. I'm in Toronto right now, and I'm just receiving so many really deep claims of transformation, that people who I know are really, they're experiencing the visionary realms, or just the deeply connected realms, just far more constantly now. So I couldn't be happier to hear anything else.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan, for sharing. And was there more you wanted to share at the moment? Was that Ryan, was there more you wanted to share at the moment?
Just that like our creativity really is the key, like what we're willing to believe, how far we're willing to push the envelope of what we think is possible. And I think the one thing that has just been jumping out is this idea of shared volition, meaning that we inspire people to do things, and people inspire us to take action like beyond our wildest imagination. There's tons of things going down in the dream state every night, and we're connected beyond belief. So I would just say really a sense of humor is so valuable in these times, because we're both at complete effect by some energies, forces, people, and we are the effect equally. It's quite the dance we're a part of. So I just hope that you all feel it on a deeper level, and make those connections with the elements, with the stars, the forces that all the ancients depict, and make known that there's something special about them. And I think this is what's really going to root us through these times, is as you were saying, more like the ceremonial and shamanic elements of this whole idea of a spirit world. Are we being guided? And the truth is we are, because being fully human we've been at it for thousands of years, and there is a fire that is still burning from ancient times, and it comes through many ways.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Very well said. And thank you for sharing your story. Again, that's obviously very personal, but I think it's for us as a team, it's very valuable to be able to hear that, just to be able to understand more about your journey as well. So, and again, I just really appreciate what you bring to the table, man. And yeah,
thank you.
And yeah, as we kind of move into the conclusion for this broadcast and everything like that, again, I really enjoy the conversation here. I think for me, if we're taking things out of this, I think it's important to just kind of be able to understand that, like, I'm a really big proponent of this idea of helping people realize that this world is much more magical than it may appear, or that it may appear based on how you currently perceive it. But if you change the way you perceive it, you can see the magic that is already there. And so, like, again, when we're talking about spirits and stuff like that, I think it's important to understand that, like, everything that is physical right now comes as like an extension of the waves that are spirit to begin with. So like this is kind of where you get into the idea of like animism, where again, you know, with like in Asian traditions and stuff, that they talk about like the spirit of the river, the spirit of the mountains, the spirit of the plants, the spirit of the trees. Literally everything kind of has like fractal versions of spirits, bigger spirits for an entire region, smaller spirits for particular areas, for particular items even. And so it's like kind of like everything that has like a physical incarnation kind of begins as like a spiritual wavelength, so to speak. And so like in this sense, again, it's really understanding that like there's nothing in this physical reality that is separate from spirit. And so what I have come to, one of the things that fascinates me, and this will actually be a topic for future Destiny School, we'll really get into the realm of like psychedelics and psychedelic medicine. One of my really, really good friends, they were telling me about this experience where like when they were younger, they worked with like LSD fairly consecutively within the period of when they were like just like 18, 19 years old. And then eventually it got to this point where they were kind of like in that LSD vibrational state consistently, like even when they weren't in LSD, even when they hadn't ingested it. And basically, again, like with the psychedelics, basically what it, in a simplified way of putting it, it's like pulling back the filters. So right now within this baseline reality, everything appears super solid. You can't like, empty space looks like empty space. It looks pretty normal. It doesn't look very scary. Like nothing's really jumping out at us. It looks, we can concentrate, we can, you know, drive a car properly. But when the filters peeled back, and this is what she was explaining, they were explaining, it gets into this idea that like for them, like this was their experience. They were literally just talking about the idea that like seeing spirits for them actually became normal. Like they would kind of like see them out of the peripheral. They would kind of like see them as like kind of like semi-transparent luminous figures that would kind of like float around and everything like that. And they said that they had like faces to them. They had like a presence to them. They had like a personality to them. And they were just kind of like going about their day to day, kind of in the same way that we were. And then it's just kind of fascinating to be able to hear that from like that firsthand account of, you know, like understanding that if you were to peel back the filters right now, you would literally be able to see that like you and me right now are actually like surrounded by spirits. And again, like spirits is kind of like a blanket term that we're kind of putting on there, because maybe there's different types of spirits, or there's different types of ways that spirits can show up. And one of the things that was like really powerful is even within the psychedelic experience is like understanding that, again, you know, like for me, I feel the significance of the idea of spirit really has its weight when we think about the idea of like family and of ancestry. Because again, I feel like for us where we are right now, we're not just literally going about with like our own, it's not just us, is basically what I'm trying to say, is that the path that we are on, the journey that we are on right now together individually is actually, you know, where you're going right now, your ancestors are with you, your ancestors are following you, and your ancestors are supporting you. And like, and that was like a really powerful vision that came through when like this same friend of mine, like when both of us like were working with like LSD together, and we were like just like having a moment and everything like that. And she said like she had this like super powerful vision where it was basically like we were kind of like at the center of the circle, and then there were like these like stone, it felt like stone giants that were like the ancestors, and they were kind of like looking in on us, and they were like blessing us, and they were kind of like wishing, you know, all of us with like the good, the best of our for our journey and everything. And so again, it's just kind of like a really fascinating thing, because like obviously, you know, you can look at the spirit side from one thing where it's like you're getting into like the possessions and the hauntings and the scary stuff, but there's a whole other side to spirit where it's actually incredibly uplifting and empowering and expansive in understanding that, again, you know, like where we're moving forward in terms of helping shift consciousness, we actually have an entire team that is helping us. And as we kind of like align ourselves in more of a connection with who we are, we can kind of bring in that presence to be able to help assist us, on our creativity, on the messages that we want to be able to bring forth. You know, it's kind of like in this thing where it's just kind of in a moment you might almost feel like be like, oh, like, you know, like I don't I'm not sure what I should do right now. And then you can almost kind of invite, and I think the key to this is inviting, like with consent. You're like, like ancestors, like, like speak to me, like what should I do in this situation? And then you can kind of like get like that little like voice again, either in your head or your heart, wherever you kind of feel it, or you might get like a physical symbol might appear to you in your reality. It might be one of those things where you're like, send me a sign. And then you see like a car with an 1111 drive past you, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll go that way, right? Or like you turn on the radio and suddenly it's like the song that your grandpa used to sing you or something, right? Like it's those type of things. So it's like, again, understanding that, and this is kind of branching into that topic that I was mentioning earlier, the ways in which spirit can interact with us. And so I guess like I'll just kind of list them real quick. The ways that spirit can interact with us, our dreams. Super powerful there, because that's when you're like on that same plane. You're in that mutual space where you can communicate to them, and that's where they can like actually show up in a physical, quote unquote, physical presence, and you can actually have those conversations where you can like talk to loved ones who have passed on, talk to your ancestors and stuff. Then another way that they can communicate to us or they can interact with us, electronics is like another big thing, because there's like the electromagnetic field that exists throughout this reality. And it seems that as spirit, again, like they're not, like they don't have a physical body, but they still have a presence. Like there's still like a weight to them. They can still like push things in this reality. And this is where, again, you can hear about, like light switches turning on and off, or like, or EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon, where you can hear like the voice of something coming through a recording. That's always like super fascinating to think that, like, let's assume it's not fake. Let's just assume that that's a real thing. The fact that like a voice can actually come through our electronics, like what's going on there, right? Like there's something there. The idea of spirits, like they're not as far away as we think. They're actually like still in this reality. It's crazy, right? And then you can get into this idea of, yeah, again, like even there's a video I was watching earlier today, and it was this guy, and he was in like his grandmother's house, and he was like literally filming this like cupboard that was like literally like opening and closing on its own. And from my feeling on the footage, like it kind of like gave me the tingles and stuff, because like this guy felt very genuine in terms of like what it was that he was filming and everything like that. Because again, it's just like he's like standing there and he's kind of like filming this, and he's just like, oh my god, it's happening. And you just like see this cupboard, and it just kind of like opens up, and then it kind of like closes, and then it opens up wider, and then it closes, and then it opens up, and then it slams. And it's just like, what the frig, right? Like that's, and so obviously our natural reaction is like, what the frig? Like that's scary. That's like insane. But what if like you kind of get to that point where like you actually understand that like spirit could actually communicate to us through some forms of like, kind of ways of physically interacting with this world? And what if that were to actually like open up a space where you can communicate with them? And this is, I mean, obviously this is where you get into like seances and Ouija boards and things like that, right? So I mean, obviously I'm not the first person to ask this question. So again, it's just kind of like understanding that like the journey we are on is actually still a part of the journey that spirits are on. Spirits still have their own journey, but they can still be a part of our journey, and they can still assist us. And so, I mean, people who have passed on physically, they can still be a part of our story. And again, and I think like for us as individuals, it's really kind of being mindful of like how we want to invite that into our life. Because at the same time, I think we have the free will to just be like, nope, not for me. Like I want to keep things pretty solid. Like I don't really need any quote unquote hauntings. I don't need grandma talking to me through the back of my head and stuff like that. Like that's okay. Like I know you guys are there, but like I'm going to keep up like this concept of consent, in a sense, where it's like until I invite you, just kind of watch from the crowd, right? Kind of thing, right? They're standing at the crowd, and they got their like foam fingers. They're like, you're number one, go team, right? But until you kind of like go up to the sidelines, and you're just like, hey, like, can you give me some advice? Like they kind of stay back, and they kind of respect that. So it's interesting to even think again that there's like actually this relationship that any of us can actually have with spirit right now. And this would be something for, anybody watching this to keep in mind, for those of us, all of us who have loved ones who have passed on. Again, grandparents, siblings, parents, children, anything like that, to just kind of be able to be like, okay, are there ways in which maybe I would like to be able to create some sort of communication? And again, and this can kind of almost just be created through your imagination. Again, like this is where when I walk my dog Dallin every day, we always go past my tree, one of the trees that I refer to as the Shelby tree, which was like the tree that my other dog Shelby, who passed away 2 years ago, he would always pee on it. I mean, he'd pee on a lot of trees, but like this particular tree, whenever I go to it, I always hug it. And within that, I literally just take a moment within my day to just express gratitude and to kind of connect with like that internal voice of like me talking to Shelby, and to kind of even be open to just kind of like hearing Shelby just kind of be like, you're doing good. Like you're in the right space. Keep going forward type thing. And so again, it's just like, maybe I'm just making this up completely. But again, it's just like through me, it's kind of creating this space. It's kind of creating this like ceremony. And I feel it's like a very important thing, because the alternative, the alternative would be to just like completely not have him in my life. But the fact is, like, I choose to still have not just Shelby in my life, but like the energy of what his guidance represented, of what his spirits taught me, and how I use that guidance to continue to like inspire me on my path going forward. So it's like, again, you know, you kind of think of like how our grandparents, like how their love would inspire us. You can invite that same feeling into your life right now. You can kind of look for ways to how to do it, again, through like objects, through just like taking a moment to like meditate and connect with source in your breath, and just kind of like express gratitude, to be able to set intentions for dreams, even like journaling or some things like that. There's a lot of different ways. So yeah, again, you know, like moving into the conclusion of this broadcast, and I know there's still like a little bit of a Sasquatch thing that I was going to touch upon that I hadn't hit upon yet. I think the concept of like spirits is incredibly fascinating. And I think what eventually happens is that as you become more familiar with it, the paranormal actually becomes normal. And I think like that's kind of the fascinating thing, is that like we only think of the paranormal because it's unfamiliar to us. It's weird. It's different. But what if we start seeing the bigger picture, and suddenly the paranormal actually has a context? It's not actually something where it's just like, oh my God, like, you know, it freaks us out because we're just like, this shouldn't be happening. This defies physics. This defies logic. This defies the story that I've been told. But if we change the story, if we change the context, if we change if we change the paradigm, if we shift the paradigm and the way we see it, suddenly like the interactions of spirits, the interactions of Sasquatch, the interactions of like the UFOs that we didn't talk about in this broadcast, but we'll talk about later, and things like that. Suddenly those things, if they can happen within this reality, then that makes them normal. It may not mean they're common, but it does mean they're normal. If it couldn't happen, it wouldn't happen. If it can happen, then that means that this reality is allowing it to happen for a purpose and for a reason. And I think these reasons kind of expand far beyond this culture, and that's why we have trouble with them. Because, you know, within today's context, it's like, why do I need to talk to ghosts? Like, I don't understand why I need to talk to ghosts. Back in the day, thousands and thousands of years ago, imagine how practical it would be to be able to talk to ghosts. It would be like, oh, sweet, you know, I like my elder, who was like my teacher, he passed on, but now he can still talk to me through my dream space and stuff like that. Like, that would actually be like a practical thing. You would like benefit from that. So like, how can we benefit from the awareness of spirits still being amongst us? And then even just because again, we didn't get into it in this broadcast, but like, well, we still can, but like the idea of like spirits kind of showing up on film sometime, like, again, like this, the fact that this is possible is fascinating. And even you get into the concept of orbs, real quick, I think the concept of orbs, basically I think of like, again, when you film footage, sometimes you see these orbs and they're kind of in the video, and there's like, people think of them as spirits. Very simply put, I think that orbs, if I were to try and explain this, would relate back to the concept that all of us have like a Merkaba with like around our body, and this is Merkaba is like kind of like a star tetrahedron, which is like a morphogenetic field, and it's like a vehicle that we use to travel through dimensions. And so right now it's like we have one, we're not consciously activating it, but it's there. But then for other entities, basically what they do is that they use this Merkaba to basically operate as like a little vehicle for them to kind of like move around through dimensions. And then what we recognize as orbs within different sizes are actually like different Merkabas that actually have different entities within them, which is really trippy. So if you were to like look at video footage and you see like 5 different orbs, theoretically, those 5 different orbs are like 5 different Merkabahs with individual entities within them. And those individual entities could be different types of entities, right? Whatever at that point. So again, it's just kind of, and then again, this expands into the UFO thing, because you get into the idea that some UFOs are also actually just like a bigger illuminated version of Merkabahs, so to speak. So yeah, but again, I think we'll get into like more of the UFO stuff a little bit later and everything as well. But yeah, just kind of passing it around. Let's just kind of get some closing thoughts from Luna and Ryan, who are still with us here. So Luna and Ryan, do one of you guys want to just add any kind of closing thoughts towards the topic of spirits, Sasquatch, and the paranormal before we wrap this up? One of you guys want to go say anything first? Luna? Yeah? Okay. All right. Was that a yes, Luna?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Luna.
Yeah, in concepts to wrapping this up, indeed. I think you're right, Brendan. I think we need to shift it towards making it kind of more normal. And I think you're also right that the Western culture does, I kind of want to say, subside the idea of it completely, kind of directs it more towards more fairy tale or myth or folklore, stuff like that. And I think that right there, I think that's a big part to where people don't really kind of open up to the idea that maybe, just maybe, there's paranormal things, even Sasquatch himself too, right? Like, what if there are connections to us? What if they're different beings, possibly from the future or the past, are coming intertwining with us right now, and we could be the centerpiece of the what am I looking for here? The flow of traffic, I guess you could say, of the cosmos, and we're right in the middle of experiencing everything around us in our universe and stuff like that too. So I think that it'd be really good to kind of just find ways definitely to incorporate things like UFOs and Sasquatch and spirits and demons, angels, and all that, and bring that into a different light, and definitely and most definitely, and bring it into spirituality, because a lot of myths and that relating to my ancestry as well does relate to spirits and talks about entities and stuff like that too, which has a lot of psychological ties into it as well, which they used to call back in the day ancient psychology. So back then they used myths, for example, as more of a means to look more into oneself, because gods and goddesses, sorry, would be more relation to, so closely related to humans that they would just they would incorporate that psychologically too with ourselves too. So that's one big thing I think a lot of us should probably look into, and it's great that it can go to any universal way too. So I really like that concept. So I'll just end it there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Luna. Yeah, absolutely. And again, like the fact that the concept of spirits is literally something present in every single culture means that it's probably something that we should be paying attention to. And then again, finding out how it fits within our culture, rather than just totally dismissing it. Because I think like it's in today's day and age, most of the stuff related to spirits has either just been commercialized as like entertainment, or it is something completely just like pushed away out of fear. And so like I think it's very important for us to kind of just be able to slowly, softly, carefully, and consciously begin to again open up these conversations about spirits and begin to kind of normalize things from a place of discernment at the same time. Like that's very important, because I think a lot of these ideas can get very fantastical, and I think it's important to also be able to keep grounded. Like that's kind of the balance, is that you don't want to get like too out there. So for anybody who's kind of like listening to this, like make sure you're maintaining an awareness of kind of like keeping your presence in both like your root and your crown, and ideally finding the balance in the heart is what I would say would be the intention of this. Because I think like the fascination of spirits can totally pull us out of our body and pull us out of this physical reality, but I don't feel that's necessarily the point. I feel it's about like taking the wisdom that's beyond this physical, or just like an extension of this physical, and integrating it, and again, like really being able to, you know, like use that as a motivation for why we want to help make this world a better place. Like we're helping, you know, we're doing it like on behalf of like the spirits of our ancestors, and the spirits of the planets, and the spirits of like, you know, Mother Gaia herself. So you can like literally kind of connect with the concept of spirits in that sense. And I think if anything, like spirits, what we refer to as spirits, can basically just be referred to as like packets of energy, or you know, packages of energy, and these packages exist within like fractal levels. So again, you kind of have like communities of spirits where you have like the Mother Gaia spirit, which would be like a bigger spirit, yet within that it's like an organism that's built up of many other organisms. In the same way, this body is made up of like many different blood cells, so to speak, and each one of those blood cells can be thought of as like their own individual thing, yet together it's a whole. So it's like, you know, we have like like all of us are different spirits, but then there's like the spirit of the entire earth, which is like a collective. And so again, it's kind of going back to this idea of like holy crap, like we literally are like one thing that's just like fractaled itself into many things to go through this illusion, to be able to find out how to bring itself back to the awareness of that one thing, while still living out the diversity and the unique experience that comes with living through you know, the story that we're creating. So it's like super very powerful, man. Cool. Ryan, can I pass it over to you just to kind of add in some closing thoughts, and we'll get this wrapped up pretty soon. So Ryan, go ahead, dude.
Yeah, just a gentle emphasis that if you have any openings or sensitivities to what you could call the spirit world, or just energetic sensitivities, if you have regular or interesting dreams, or if you have visions, it's just so important to explore those gifts, explore those openings, and really take the opportunity to really dig a little deeper into these worlds, if you're open to it, if you're feeling it. And just that the 7 chakra system is such a great teacher. It holds within it such a perfect map of transformation. And essentially, once you get to the third eye and crown, and you learn about the progression towards there, this is where you open up to the communication with these ethereal or even energies from people who have passed, whatever it is. But just acknowledging that there is so much material that we can use. It's freely available online to enhance the experience, and to maybe even reach a little deeper into the process.
Awesome. Totally, dude. Yeah, and again, and I think that's like kind of the beauty of where we're at. Like we definitely have like a lot of tools and knowledge, so it's up to us to be able to utilize that. And again, that's where, you know, working as a community, I think just inviting everyone again to be able to like talk about these things. And it's so important because again, you know, like there's a lot of stuff out there that it is very mysterious, but that doesn't mean it can't be understood better. You know, it's only mysterious based on our current degree of understanding. So how do we understand it? By talking about it, by sharing our experiences. And that's a big thing, is that oftentimes, like, you know, it's not just like what you read in a book, it's the experience firsthand that will mean the most to you. So what's your personal experience with spirits, and how can you develop that relationship in a way that's healthy for you, in a way that makes sense for you, in a way that's going to benefit you? And again, that may be very minimal. That may be very minimal. Again, you know, like that's kind of like with me, like throughout my day-to-day life, like I'm doing things, I'm keeping busy, I'm kicking butt. But then every now and then I'll just, you know, like I said, I'll just kind of like think about my dog, and, you know, every now and then I'll like have a dream about him. And, you know, like every now and then I'll think about my grandparents, and I'll just kind of like hold that space in my heart. And if anything, I kind of invite, what it is that I do, on behalf of like my ancestors, where it's like, you know, like you literally feel the momentum of their love moving through you. And it's kind of this very beautiful and very simple idea that like they live on through the love that you share. And like that I feel is like such a powerful idea. You know, it's just kind of like be like, oh, you know, like they've passed on, they're gone, their story's over. It's like, no, their story's continuing through you, because their story is love, and that is what we are doing together. So yeah, I'm pretty much ready to wrap this up. The only thing I wanted to say was just stuff that I didn't mention earlier with related to the Bigfoot Sasquatch thing. I just wanted to mention the Patterson-Gimlin footage, which is like that super well-known Sasquatch footage. I just didn't create context for that earlier, but I just wanted to mention that footage that people have seen with like the prominent Sasquatch footage. That was like came at a time in 1967, and Patterson and Gimlin had went out of their way because they heard of reports in the area of people who were workers, and they had like had Sasquatch encounters, and then they went out of their way to actually like try to get video footage of the Sasquatch, and like that's how like that video footage actually came to be. So it's not like a lot of people think like, oh, it could have been a hoax and everything like that. I think that's probably real footage. It's probably real footage. Again, that's kind of just like side context that should have been fit in earlier. Another thing that I just wanted to share was a concept for like this like story that I had, and then we'll wrap this up. Going back to Sasquatch and just kind of, you know, beginning and ending with Sasquatch, because again, I feel like Sasquatch is this teacher. And I think that's really what we have to see it as. We really have to look at Sasquatch as this teacher. We have to look at it as a mirror, in the same way the dream process is kind of a similar thing. And so it's like, you know, we see ourselves within Sasquatch. So if we see something like scary and not, you know, like something we don't understand, then that means that like there's parts of ourselves that we have yet to uncover. If we see Sasquatch as like this compassionate, intelligent, sentient co-creator of this reality, then that's beginning to show. It's almost like a meter. It's like a test. It's like a, you know, an acid test to kind of be able to say like, okay, if you can see Sasquatch as like something conscious and friendly, then maybe you're open to be able to receive it. And maybe, you know, maybe you'll start having dreams of Sasquatch or something like that, right? Or maybe you can channel the Sasquatch spirit, right? But what I was going to say was this quick kind of story, and this is actually a story that I had a long time ago, and just kind of like putting it out there, so like copyright and stuff like that, and I plan on making like a children's book of this, or maybe in the future I might do like some sort of like animation for this, but it's a really simple story, and it's a really beautiful one. And again, please don't, if you do make millions of dollars off of that, just, you know, give me a little bit of credit, and as long as the story is getting out there, that's cool. But basically the story that I had, and again, I had this like way back in the day, because again, Sasquatch was always like a fascination for me, was basically this story of like a boy and his family who are out camping, and this takes place in like modern day age. So this is like basically a short little story. And then like one day, closer to, as it's like approaching, it's kind of like midday, maybe it's like, you know, like after dinner or something like that. And then the mother and father, they're at the campsite, and then the boy's like, okay, like, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna go like wander off into go hike the trails by the river and stuff like that. And they're just like, okay, you know, make sure you're back before sunset. And he's done this before, so it's like totally cool. And so anyways, he's like walking the trail. And then eventually he gets to a certain point where he can like hear something kind of like calling him inside. He can feel it. It's like an intuitive thing. And then eventually he like gets to a certain point where he sees a Sasquatch. And this Sasquatch is actually like sitting down by itself, just kind of like cross-legged, and it's actually meditating. And then basically what happens is that like as this boy, who's kind of like already like intuitively sensitive, he like sees a Sasquatch, the Sasquatch like communicates to him telepathically and basically says to him like, be like, I know you're there, like it's okay, you can come closer if you want. And then so what happens is that it opens up into this story where this like young boy actually like meets a Sasquatch, and the Sasquatch was actually going to be like a female Sasquatch. I mean, it could have been male, but in this case we'll just pretend it's a female. And then basically this Sasquatch takes this boy through this like transcendental reflective meditative journey, where together the Sasquatch basically reveals to the boy and the audience reading this kind of like the mysteries of the universe. It kind of reveals to him his unity. It reveals to him like the idea of like of multidimensional reality. And so it's like him and it's like Sasquatch and this boy kind of like meditating together, and they're kind of like going through dimensional realms. And it's like this really like uplifting kind of story, and then at the end of it, you know, Sasquatch is just kind of be like, you know, it was nice meeting you, and then like, you know, like we'll see each other again someday. And then the boy kind of in this like state of just kind of like, oh, okay, that was fascinating, but at the same time not even completely unusual, just kind of like goes back to the campsite, and it's like, and he's going back, and like the sun's like just beginning to set, and then the story just kind of ends there, where it's like this boy has this like fantastical experience, and he just kind of returns to the campsite, and maybe he tells his parents, maybe he doesn't, you don't really know, it just kind of ends there. But to the audience, they kind of get through this whole experience of like, yeah, you know, like, wow, like Sasquatch is like this multi-dimensional being as we are, who is actually here to teach us. And like, just imagine that like maybe there's a reality out there, maybe there's a possibility out there where, you know, like you too will be able to get to meet a Sasquatch someday, and you too will get to be able to like sit down and have ceremony with them, and it won't actually be this incredibly far-fetched thing. I mean, I know it sounds far-fetched now, but again, just kind of like hold that vibration in the back of your head, just kind of think about that, because maybe that will be a thing someday. Now, in terms of like whether or not that will actually like I don't know, it's hard to say, because I feel that like in terms of if that will ever be a thing and then get documented, and then, you know, a video gets released of it or something like that, I feel that the universe does a very good job of keeping the mysterious a mystery. And I think this will continue to happen, and this happens through happenstance and synchronicity and things like that. This is like why like there's no real like super vivid like UFO footage. Like there's lots of it out there, but there's not one where it's like always like 100% where you're like, yes, that is a UFO. There's always going to be this degree of mystery, and I think that mystery exists to call us, to keep us looking, to keep us moving forward. Because as soon as like, if that mystery were suddenly just like replaced with a finite conclusion, it would take away a bit of the magic. And so I think like wherever there is mystery, there is like something calling us further, and that mystery will always unfold slightly beyond our reach. The further we look, the more the mystery will expand. So again, even as we're talking about things here about the mystery of Sasquatch, I guarantee you that if we were to get even closer to that, there would actually be more mystery that would unfold that we probably haven't even fathomed, even within this broadcast. So just kind of trying to wrap our heads around that. So thank you again to oh my god, my sign fell down, it's a spirit. Ooh. No, it's gravity, guys. Do you see that? I don't know, maybe. Could have been. It fell down earlier too. It's not a big deal. Or is it a big deal? I don't know. Anyways, shout out to all the spirits who are like here with us now. So it like straight up, like imagine just kind of like taking a moment where it's just kind of like that's probably something that I feel a lot of us could kind of do, is kind of just express gratitude to the spirits who are with us, who have been with us, and who will continue to be with us. Because I feel even just kind of like opening up a connection with gratitude could be a very powerful thing. And I feel like if anything, the spirits probably don't get enough of that. Like I feel like the spirits are just gonna be like, oh, like thanks, man, like I work really, really hard at trying to like keep you on track and stuff, and you like don't even notice half the time. Thank you so much for just like appreciating all the hard work I do. And honestly, you could say the same thing to trees. You should make sure that like how many trees are you hugging a day? The answer is not enough. So next time you're in the forest, go like hug a tree and literally just thank the tree. Literally just thank the tree, and just like have this feeling in the back of your heart that where the tree's just like, oh, like thank you man, like thank you for seeing me. And so again, you know, trees have spirits too, and Sasquatch has a spirit, and we have a spirit, and this is you know, this is all just like one test for the universe to be able to see itself through the many different forms, through the illusions of fear, and just like really being able to continue to open our heart to really be able to receive what is here for us. And the answer for that is magic. You know, there's magic all around us, and as we continue to open to it, we continue to be able to like help share it with others. And so again, you know, that's kind of the lesson of the Sasquatch, is that we activate our light so that we can carry it with others. The Sasquatch reminds us of the magic of this world, so we were reminded of the magic of ourselves, so that we can remind others of the magic within themselves, so that we can awaken to our potential. yeah, so with that said, I think we're pretty much ready to summarize. And again, thank you so much. We're ready to conclude. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this broadcast. And again, the intention here is that this gives you a couple more paradigm shifts, a couple more seeds of inspiration for you to just be able to be like, wow, like heck yeah, like this world is really super magical, and I want to be able to explore more of it and be able to open up to the infinite diversity and experience of this human potential that we exist within. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. Again, just shout out to everyone who's in the chat as well. Please feel free to leave your comments afterwards to continue the discussion down below. And I'll just remind you guys that, again, we have our regular team roundtables every Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then our Sunday meditations on Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, that's at youtube.com/skullbabylon or live.paradigmshiftcentral.com. And also you can support on Patreon. I'm not going to refresh the Patreon right now. I don't think there are any new donations during the show right now, but I'll be sure to keep an eye on that. And again, if you want to be able to help continue what it is that we provide for the community, which is awesome value, like there is a lot of value in what we are continuing to create for the community, and that's continuing to grow. And I appreciate everyone so much for adding their presence to this value. Then be sure to sign up for the Patreon with a monthly micro donation. Get your Shifted Booster Kit, your Light Guardian Crystal for a super affordable price of $3 to $10 pledge contribution. And the basic idea with the pledges, I'll just mention this real quick, is that ideally we want people to continue to keep their pledges going as long as they can. This is the model that works. But if you need to like sign up and you need to like put your pledge on hold at any point, totally cool. Just let us know. So we're super flexible in that way. So in case there's any of you just like, I wouldn't know if I would be able to pledge forever, but it's okay. So again, thank you to everyone. We're at 153 Patreon at 912 monthly earnings, and that's going to continue to go up. Eventually that's going to be over 175. Eventually that's going to be over 200. Eventually we're going to be at the point where we are literally like bringing in enough awesome monthly income to be able to continue to put it back into the community, to continue to be able to support and sponsor you guys in terms of being able to continue to create the art, continue to bring all of the amazing things that you do into this world. So there's a lot more coming to this project, and again, I'm just super grateful to be able to hold this space with you guys together as a team. So thank you so much, and go team. So with that said, yeah, continue to do the research. Again, the documentaries, Bigfoot Into the Forest, keep an eye open for that, and the sequel coming in the near future. And also, speaking of Sasquatch, and again, you can check that out on YouTube, and I'll put it into the show notes. And yeah, be sure to check us out at Paradigm Shift Radio on iTunes if you want to download the MP3s of this broadcast, and go tell your friends and continue this conversation and keep the topics rolling. And there's so much more to talk about. So leave your comments, add a like to this video, and yeah, as always, keep it shifty, and we will see you guys in the future. So I'm gonna pull up the audio music, and as I'm doing that, I'm just gonna invite Luna and Ryan to say goodnight with me here, and we'll send some love out to all the shifters out there. So Ryan, Luna, unmute your guys' microphones, say goodnight to all the shifters out there. So good night, guys. Good night. We love you.
Good night, everyone. Good luck.
May Sasquatch be with you always. So. Awesome. All right. Have a happy Halloween. I hope someone dresses up as Sasquatch now. I hope so. All right. Thanks again, guys. Much love. See you soon.